Chapter 362, the Ouyang family patriarch compromises, and the Qingtian lineage is purged. The other old ancestors of the Ouyang family, however, seem not to notice the look in the old ancestor of the Ouyang family's eyes, merely staring calmly at Ouyang Batian. For them, appeasing Ouyang Batian was the best option right now. Even if all the experts of the Qingtian prince's residence died, it wouldn't be a major issue for them. I don't care how many people from the Qingtian prince's residence survive. Ouyang Qingtian must die, and he must be handed over to me. Upon hearing the words of the old ancestor of the Ouyang family, Ouyang Batian understood that the old ancestor of the Ouyang family had already made the biggest concession. Thus, he looked at this old ancestor of the Ouyang family with a serious expression. At the same time, he also made his biggest concession. He didn't care how many disciples of the Ouyang family in the Qingtian prince's residence perished. He only wanted Ouyang Qingtian to perish. Of course, Ouyang Qingtian also had to die by his hand. Old ancestor, you wouldn't be unable to even do this much, would you? If old ancestor cannot do it, then there's no need to continue talking today. Seeing that the old ancestor holding a crimson gold long spear did not speak, Ouyang Batian continued, and after speaking, the chi on his body became even more terrifying. It was as if he wanted to completely destroy the entire imperial palace. At the same time, the disciples of the Ouyang family with lower cultivation also perished one after another. This terrifying forbidden art on Ouyang Batian's body was truly too terrifying. Therefore, the disciples of the Ouyang family with low cultivation could not withstand it. This seat can agree to your terms, but this seat hopes you can bring glory to my Ouyang family and not do anything that makes this seat difficult again. After a moment of silence, this old ancestor of the Ouyang family directly agreed, but his eyes were filled with killing intent when he looked at Ouyang Batian. At the same time, this was also the biggest concession he had made. Of course, what they didn't know was that the Ouyang family wouldn't survive much longer. Haha, since old ancestor has already agreed, then I should go deal with Ouyang Qingtian now. Upon hearing the old ancestor's words, Ouyang Batian showed no intention of staying. He instantly transformed into a streak of light and headed towards the city gate of the imperial palace. As for the several old ancestors of the Ouyang family, they had no intention of stopping him. After all, if they tried to stop Ouyang Batian again, the outcome awaiting them would be the same as before. Are we really going to let him do as he pleases? The old ancestor of Ouyang Qingtian's lineage had terrifying killing intent in his eyes at this moment. And when he looked at this old ancestor, he was extremely unwilling. After all, Ouyang Batian was going to kill the disciples of their lineage this time. So how could he possibly endure it? Besides this method, do you want all the disciples of my Ouyang family to be buried with him? Upon hearing the old ancestor's words, the old ancestor of the Ouyang family also showed a displeased expression, and then he spoke angrily to the old ancestor of the Qingtian lineage. If it weren't for your lineage provoking this fellow to this extent, then how could the disciples of our other lineages suffer along with them? Another old ancestor also stepped forward at this time, looking at the old ancestor of the Qingtian lineage with hatred. At this moment, he wished he could unleash all his anger on this old ancestor of the Qingtian lineage. Didn't he just say that his forbidden art is only effective within 1,000 li? We can take him beyond 1,000 li and then deal with him. At this moment, one of the old ancestors of the Ouyang family stepped forward and proposed a method, and his eyes held a hint of unusual movement as he spoke. The other old ancestors also reacted after hearing his words, then looked meaningfully in the direction Ouyang Batian had left. This matter ends here. Don't act rashly before truly understanding his trump cards. And the old ancestor of the Ouyang family, holding a crimson gold long spear, slowly stepped forward and spoke at this moment. He didn't believe that Ouyang Batian had no other trump cards. If he had no other trump cards, Ouyang Batian would definitely not have left so easily. The other old ancestors also reacted after hearing his words, and then they returned to the imperial mausoleum together. They did not want to continue dealing with external matters. They were unable to resolve the external matters now. At this moment, Ouyang Batian had already arrived at the city gate. The terrifying chi on his body had begun to slowly dissipate, and his cultivation had once again returned to the early stage Saint King. Because of the use of the forbidden art this time, his hair had turned completely white. However, even so, the excitement on his face could not be erased. Ouyang Qingtian, it's time for you to pay with your life now. Then, he arrogantly spoke to Ouyang Qingtian in front of him, and after speaking, the Saint King realm chi belonging to him completely erupted. At the same time, he instantly appeared beside Ouyang Qingtian. Ouyang Qingtian and Ouyang Long, upon seeing this scene, showed expressions of shock. They hadn't expected Ouyang Batian to be able to escape from the hands of the old ancestors. Moreover, from the current situation, Ouyang Batian seemed to have reached an agreement with the old ancestors in the imperial palace. Thinking of this, Ouyang Long's face showed an excited smile. Initially, he had thought that their lineage would completely decline in this great battle, but he hadn't expected the final outcome to be their lineage achieving victory. Ouyang Qingtian, however, looked at Ouyang Batian with an expression of disbelief, constantly muttering, "Impossible, impossible." While Ouyang Batian was dealing with the old ancestors in the imperial palace, the old ancestors of the three great families who were observing the battle also looked on in disbelief. They hadn't expected this great battle to end in such a way, and what followed was a major purge in the imperial city. Ouyang Batian naturally showed no mercy to the Qingtian prince's residence. In just a few days, the entire Qingtian prince's residence completely disappeared into the river of history. This greatly angered the old ancestor of the Qingtian prince's residence, who then wanted to seek revenge on Ouyang Batian, but he was stopped by the other old ancestors. While this earth-shattering battle was happening in the Shuanghua Empire, the army of the Great Xia Dynasty, which had come from the eastern region, finally arrived in the northern region. Chu Fan and the others finally set foot on the territory of the northern region. Their landing place was near the Shuanghua Empire in the northern region. Although it was desolate around them, the spiritual energy here was much stronger than in the eastern region. If they cultivated here, their cultivation would definitely increase faster than cultivating in the eastern region. Chapter 363, The Distribution of Power in the Northern Region. Meng Tian and 200,000 Qin Iron Cavalry. The million-strong army that had appeared in the northern region at this moment looked ahead with great excitement. Their presence here meant they could conquer the entire northern region, which would then become a territory of their Great Xia Dynasty. I'll leave the rest to the four of you. I only hope you can take the entire northern region at the fastest possible speed. Chu Fan looked at the territory before him and slowly spoke to Qin Xiong and the other three beside him. His appearance in the northern region this time was not to command them, but merely to observe the scenery of the northern region. Of course, as the emperor of the Great Xia Dynasty, he naturally accompanied the army on the expedition, as this was the only way to truly inspire the morale of the troops. Your Majesty, rest assured, your subordinate general and the others will definitely conquer the northern region at the fastest possible speed. Chen Jibao and the other three saluted Chu Fan with serious expressions after hearing Chu Fan's words. Afterward, they began their discussion. The distribution of power in the northern region was quite simple, divided into two major peak empires. They were the Shuanghua Empire of the Ouyang family and the Northern Dragon Empire of the Duga family. Both empires possessed existences at the Saint King level. Moreover, the Ouyang family had 6 Saint King level experts. As for the legendary Duga family within the Northern Dragon Empire, they likely possessed 7 Saint King level experts. Aside from these two empires, the rest of the northern region consisted of imperial dynasties. The strength of these imperial dynasties was far inferior compared to the two empires. The strongest cultivator in any of these imperial dynasties was merely at the saint entry level. Furthermore, these imperial dynasties were all vassal states of the two major empires. Therefore, the Great Xia Dynasty did not need to concern itself with the imperial dynasties. After all, their strength posed no threat to the Great Xia Dynasty. Of course, besides these two empires, the northern region had one other peak power, the Overlord Blade Sect, located on the borders of the two empires. This sect possessed Saint King level experts, and not just one Saint King level expert. Its disciples numbered in the hundreds of thousands. The forces in the northern region are truly intricate, but for us, this presents a great opportunity for unification. Qin Jibao was somewhat surprised after reading the intelligence gathered by the net of Luo and the embroidered uniform guard. He had not expected the northern region to have so many powers, and combined, these powers possessed around 20 to 30 Saint King level experts. However, this had little impact on them. In reality, the Saint King level experts in the northern region were not as simple as they appeared. For instance, the Shuanghua Empire seemingly only had 6 Saint King level experts on the surface. Yet, no one knew how many hidden old ancestors the Ouyang family possessed. They only knew that the revealed Saint King level combat power amounted to 6 individuals. Moreover, the peak aristocratic families within the empire also contained Saint King level experts. Therefore, the Shuanghua Empire alone had at least 10 or more Saint King level cultivators. The two empires and the 6 great dynasties. We should deal with the 6 great dynasties first before tackling the 2 empires. Of course, we only need to dispatch 6 generals to resolve these 6 great dynasties. While solving these 6 great dynasties, we can also advance toward the other 2 empires. Yu Fei nodded after hearing Chen Jibao's words, and then he slowly turned his gaze towards the map in front of him. The map clearly marked the profiles of all the forces in the northern region. Qin Xiong and the other three also nodded after hearing Yu Fei's words. Although the powers in the northern region were somewhat intricate, it would still be very easy for them to deal with these 6 great dynasties. The Tianyuan dynasty will be left to General Zilong. General Zilong's current strength can easily resolve the Tianyuan dynasty. After Qin Xiong and the other three agreed with his suggestion, Yu Fei slowly pointed at the Tianyuan dynasty on the map and spoke to everyone present. At the same time, he planned to assign the Tianyuan dynasty to Zhao Zilong. Zhao Zilong's strength had already reached the late Saint King, so dealing with a small Tianyuan dynasty was naturally not an issue. The Wufeng imperial dynasty will be left to the 7th young master of the Yang family to resolve. Yang Yi glanced at another imperial dynasty on the map, then slowly addressed the people present. After he finished speaking, the 7th young master of the Yang family below all showed expressions of excitement. The 100 Battles dynasty will be given to Lu Bu. The Zifeng imperial dynasty will be given to Yuan Qingdu. The Yuhua imperial dynasty will be given to Dian Wei and Su Chu. As for the last one, the Longxing imperial dynasty, let's assign it to Pei Yuanqing. Chen Jibao and the other three quickly arranged the fate of the 6 great dynasties. Furthermore, every person they assigned had already reached the Saint King level, making the resolution of these 6 imperial cities extremely easy. While Chen Jibao and the others were arranging the fate of the 6 great dynasties, Chu Fan, on the other side, began his path of summoning. Although he had used several summoning opportunities during this year, he still had 6 unlimited summoning cards remaining. While his other summoning card from this year had already been used up, only one character was added from those other unlimited summoning cards, Meng Tian, who was formerly of the Great Qin Imperial Dynasty. The summoned Meng Tian's strength reached the late Saint King. Furthermore, in this unlimited summoning card draw, Meng Tian not only reached the late Saint King, he was also summoned along with 200,000 Great Qin Iron Cavalry. These 200,000 Great Qin Iron Cavalry included 20 Saint entry-level cultivators, and the cultivation of the 2 deputy generals within this Great Qin Iron Cavalry also reached the early stage Saint King. Therefore, this summoning greatly enhanced the strength of the Great Xia dynasty. However, Chu Fan did not bring Meng Tian and this army to the northern region. Although the Great Xia dynasty's strength was already formidable, the Great Xia dynasty naturally needed troops stationed at home at this time. This was also why the young General Hua Xiubing did not follow them to the northern region. Currently, Hua Xiubing and Meng Tian were both staying in the eastern region to guard the Great Xia dynasty. Of course, the main reason Hua Xiubing stayed behind was that he was about to achieve a breakthrough. As the historically famous marquee champion, Hua Xiubing's talent far surpassed that of ordinary people. Moreover, in novels set in the mythological world, Hua Xiubing was the reincarnation of Neza, the 3rd prince of the heavenly court. Therefore, during this past year, Hua Xiubing's cultivation successfully achieved a breakthrough to the Saint King consummation realm. He was currently in seclusion attempting a breakthrough to the Great Saint realm. As long as he successfully achieved a breakthrough to the Great Saint realm, the Great Xia dynasty would gain another Great Saint realm expert. Of course, the Great Xia dynasty currently had quite a few Great Saint realm experts. Looking at the 6 unused unlimited summoning cards in the system space, Chu Fan's eyes were filled with endless anticipation. He wanted to see what kind of existences the remaining 6 unlimited summoning cards could summon. Chapter 364 Grand Tutor Yuan Ta, the Blood Droplet Organization, and the Divine Beast Vermilion Bird. Looking at the 6 unlimited summoning cards in the system space, Chu Fan used them without the slightest hesitation. Ding! The unlimited summoning card was used successfully. The host obtained the Great Saint level summoned character Yuan Tu. Congratulations to the host for successfully obtaining the Great Saint level summoned organization, Blood Droplets. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the Great Saint level summoned Spirit Beast, Vermilion Bird. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the Saint King level summon character, Sword God. Congratulations to the host for obtaining 1 Saint King level army summoning card. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the Quasi-Emperor level summon character, Divine General Fei Peng. Soon, the 6 summoning cards appeared in Chu Fan's mind. At the same time, the details of the summoned items on these 6 summoning cards were instantly imprinted into Chu Fan's mind. When Chu Fan saw what these 6 unlimited summoning cards had summoned, he was completely stunned. The first summoning card summoned a Great Saint level character. Although the Great Xia dynasty already had Great Saint level summon characters, adding another Great Saint level summon character was still the icing on the cake for Chu Fan. What's more, the Great Saint character summoned this time was Yuan Tuo from the Xinxiao world. One must know that he was a protagonist who wielded the Xianyuan sword. If the demonic lord had not swapped his fate, he would have been the true protagonist of that world. But even after the demonic lord swapped his fate, his influence in that world was in no way inferior to that of the protagonist. Furthermore, how could a character recognized by the Xianyuan sword be mediocre? In his previous life, Chu Fan greatly admired him, as he was a figure even more overbearing than the earthly emperor. Moreover, the strength of the Yuan Ta summoned this time was not weak, although he was a great saint-level summon character. However, the cultivation of the Yuan Ta summoned this time had reached the great sage perfection realm. It was likely that his strength was not far behind that of God King Jiang Taishu. It could even be said that, given Yuan Tuo's speed of cultivation, it might not take him long to break through to the quasi-emperor realm. It could be said that summoning this Yuan Tuo of the Great Sage Perfection realm was equivalent to summoning a quasi-emperor realm expert. The second summoning card gave Chu Fan something even more exciting. What was summoned on the second summoning card was not an individual character, but the Great Saint level organization, Blood Droplets. Although Chu Fan had never heard of the reputation of Blood Droplets, but the mere fact that it belonged to a Great Saint level organization showed how powerful Blood Droplets was. Filled with curiosity, Chu Fan immediately opened the introduction to Blood Droplets. When Chu Fan saw the introduction about Blood Droplets, he was completely shocked. He had initially thought he had a high estimation of Blood Droplets, but he hadn't expected that he had still underestimated its power. Blood Droplets was an assassin organization. Moreover, the leader of Blood Droplets within this assassin organization had reached the late stage Great Sage. One must know that it was quite easy for a Great Saint realm expert in an assassin organization to assassinate a cultivator of the same realm. Among the top experts in Blood Droplets, there were 10 Great Saint level assassins. These 10 Great Saint level assassins were named Blood 1 to Blood 10, and their cultivation ranged from early stage Great Sage to middle stage Great Sage. In other words, the Blood Droplets organization provided Chu Fan with 10 additional Great Saint level experts. It could be said that this single Blood Droplets organization raised the strength of the Great Xia dynasty by a level. Furthermore, this Blood Droplets organization also contained 100 Saint King level assassins. 100 Saint King level assassins. Even the current Saint King level experts of the Great Xia dynasty could only barely compare to Blood Droplets. And this was only because, due to the Time Pagoda, the Saint entry level cultivators of the Great Xia dynasty had recently managed to break through to the Saint King realm. Without the Time Pagoda, the Saint King level experts of the Great Xia dynasty would still be inferior to the Saint King level experts within Blood Droplets. As for the Blood Droplets assassins below the Saint entry level or True King realm, there were even more. It could be said that the Blood Droplets organization, Chu Fan, summoned this time, could completely form a first-rate power. And this first-rate power was situated in the Central region. Of course, because the Blood Droplets organization lacked quasi-emperor level experts. No matter how formidable Blood Droplets was in the Central region, it could not compare with those top expert forces. I didn't expect such benefits from just 2 unlimited summoning cards this time. Moreover, Blood Droplets arrived just at the right time. Although the strength displayed by the underworld in the public eye is considerable, the current assassinations still require Sword Immortal and others to take action, which is a waste of their talent. It seems it is time to dispatch Blood Droplets to the Central region. Chu Fan instantly had an idea regarding the Blood Droplets organization. Although the underworld had gained great fame in the Central region during this period, assassinating those top experts still required Sword Immortal, Li Chungang, and others to make a move. For Chu Fan, the talents of Sword Immortal and the others should not be buried here. However, initially, the assassination organization within the Great Xia dynasty was not strong. Therefore, Chu Fan could only let Sword Immortal and his companions act as the underworld's top expert assassins. But the appearance of Blood Droplets now gave Chu Fan hope of recalling Sword Immortal and the others. After all, professional tasks require professional people. The Blood Droplets organization was inherently a professional assassination organization, so returning to their old profession would naturally be very easy for them. What's more, this Blood Droplets organization also possessed so many great Saint-level experts and Saint King-level cultivators. This perfectly compensated for the shortcomings of the underworld. After reading the introduction regarding Blood Droplets, Chu Fan slowly shifted his gaze toward the third summoning card. What he summoned this time was not just a character. The third summoning card summoned a spirit beast, and not just an ordinary spirit beast, but the legendary Vermilion Bird. The Vermilion Bird was considered a top expert existence even in the mythical world. One must know that in the mythical world of the Zhou clan, the Vermilion Bird was one of the foremost divine beasts. Furthermore, the Vermilion Bird was naturally capable of controlling fire, so it was also known as the Overlord of Fire. It could be said that in the mythical world, the Vermilion Bird was in existence regarded as a top expert divine beast. Even a drop of its blood could help other spirit beasts grow. The vermilion bird Chu Fan, summoned this time, did not reach the level of strength he had anticipated, but its cultivation had already reached the late-stage Great Sage. As long as it fully reached adulthood, this vermilion bird would be able to reach the Quasi-Emperor realm, and there would be no difficulty whatsoever for the vermilion bird to enter the Quasi-Emperor realm. As long as it reached adulthood, it could enter the Quasi-Emperor realm. This was truly enviable talent. Chapter 365, Sword God Shimen Shueshua, 100,000 White Horse Cavalry. More importantly, the vermilion bird's speed far surpasses that of other cultivators at the same realm. Although the vermilion bird is currently only at the late-stage Great Sage, his speed makes him difficult for even ordinary Quasi-Emperor realm experts to catch up to. This is also why Chu Fan likes him so much. The divine beasts have already been summoned. I wonder what else can be summoned in the future. Perhaps the legendary 4 great divine beasts can also be summoned. Chu Fan's face was filled with anticipation at this moment. Since the vermilion bird had already been summoned, would the 4 great divine beasts also be summoned later? The 4 great divine beasts in mythology are divided into the Dragon Clan, the Phoenix Clan, the Black Tortoise Clan, and the White Tiger Clan. These are the legendary 4 great divine beasts. However, Chu Fan believed that the vermilion bird was not weaker than the legendary 4 great divine beasts. And besides these legendary 4 great divine beasts, there is also the Qilin Clan. As a symbol of auspiciousness, the Qilin Clan is also considered one of the most top expert divine beasts in the mythical world. Chu Fan slowly withdrew his joyful gaze from the 3rd summoning card, and then he turned his attention to the 4th summoning card. The character summoned from this card was the weakest of all the characters summoned this time. After all, the weakest characters on the other summoning cards were at the Great Saint level, in addition to an army. However, although the character summoned from the summoning card only reached the Saint King realm, Chu Fan felt that this unlimited summoning card was very worthwhile. Because the character summoned this time was the legendary Sword God. His strength, how powerful it was recognized by everyone. After all, he won the battle against Sword Immortal Yiguqing. Although Sword Immortal sought death in that great battle, nevertheless, the great battle between Sword God and Sword Immortal ultimately resulted in Sword God's victory. Moreover, Sword Immortal's state of mind was not as good as Sword God's. This is also why Sword God was able to win in the end. Of course, although the Sword God summoned this time was still in the Saint King realm, his cultivation had already reached the Saint King consummation realm. It shouldn't be long before he break through to the Great Saint realm. Furthermore, Chu Fan felt that Sword God's realm this time should have been suppressed by the system. Otherwise, Sword God's cultivation when summoned should have reached the Great Saint level. After all, in the world he came from, his cultivation time was longer than Sword Immortal's. After Sword Immortal fell, Sword God was still cultivating, so his cultivation should have reached the Great Saint realm. However, even if Sword God's cultivation was only at the Saint King consummation realm, Chu Fan was very satisfied. After all, this person is the Sword God. Moreover, at this time, the Sword God, Sword Immortal, and Sword Demon were already gathered in the Great Xia Dynasty. The number of sword experts in the Great Xia Dynasty was now countless. Thinking of this, a playful look suddenly appeared on Chu Fan's face. If he gathered these Sword Gods, Sword Immortals, and Sword Demons to form a Sword Dao organization, would it be comparable to those so-called heavenly sword sects in the Central region? Thinking of this, Chu Fan felt that this idea of his was very necessary. Of course, even if a Sword Dao organization was formed, Chu Fan would still let them remain under the rule of the Great Xia Dynasty. He would just let them serve as a branch of the Great Xia Dynasty. After reading the introduction about Sword God, Chu Fan slowly suppressed this thought in his heart. Although this idea was very good for him right now, he was more eager to see the remaining summoning cards. After all, he hadn't finished reading the introductions for 2 more summoning cards. Then, Chu Fan looked at the second to last summoning card. What was summoned from the summoning card was not a Saint King level character, but a Saint King level army. Of course, the Saint King level army mentioned here does not mean that all the soldiers in the army have reached the Saint King level in cultivation. If that were truly the case, then this army could already sweep across the world. In fact, generally speaking, the same rank items summoned by Chu Fan using unlimited summoning cards are usually organizations or armies, which are greater than summon characters. Although the summon characters are famous top expert, the number of people in a summoned organization or army of the same rank far exceeds that of a single summoned character. For example, summoning Yuan Ta at the Great Saint level and the Great Saint level assassin organization, Blood Droplets. Yuan Tuo's strength is indeed an invincible existence within the Great Saint realm. The Great Saint realm experts within the Great Saint level assassin organization alone already number 11, not to mention the Saint King and below Saint King assassins. Therefore, generally speaking, summoned organizations or armies are more representative. And this army summoning card also surprised Chu Fan, because what was summoned from this army summoning card was actually the White Horse Volunteers, and its number reached as many as 100,000. Among these more than 100,000 soldiers, there was one late Saint King commander, in addition to 10 Saint King level cultivators serving as generals, and as for Saint Realm cultivators, there were as many as 100. The weakest cultivation in this army also reached the Grotto Heaven realm, which means this army is composed of cultivators above the Grotto Heaven realm. Moreover, the war horses they rode were also Grotto Heaven realm white horses. Their combined combat power surpasses that of ordinary Grotto Heaven realm cultivators. What's more, the combat power of an army is inherently stronger than that of individual cultivators. Therefore, this Saint King summoning card was a gain for Chu Fan this time. If a Saint King level cultivator were summoned, his effect would certainly not be as powerful as this army. Even summoning a perfected Saint King would not compare to such an army. Even if it meant exchanging Sword God for this army, Chu Fan would unhesitatingly choose this army over Sword God. From this, one can see the power of this army. Moreover, to stabilize the entire Great Xia dynasty, what is needed is certainly not just those top expert. Although top expert are the trump card of an imperial dynasty or immortal dynasty. But if there is no army, then how can this country be managed? After all, a country cannot be ruled by relying solely on some top expert. Even in those sects, some utility disciple with not so strong talent are recruited. The main purpose of these utility disciple is to help the sect establish itself better. Perhaps their cultivation is not very high, but they can handle things that those prodigy do not handle. Otherwise, would those top expert prodigy still have to come down and deal with those trivial matters themselves? Chapter 366, Quasi-Emperor General Fei Peng, System Task. After reading the introduction about this army, Chu Fan slowly turned his gaze to the last summoning card. It can be said that among the characters summoned this time, the one that surprised and delighted Chu Fan the most was this last summoning card. The character summoned from this last summoning card was not only in the Quasi-Emperor realm, he was also the legendary General Fei Peng. The name General Fei Peng is surely familiar to people of later generations. After all, this name represents the top combat power of the three realms. In that Xinxiao world, Fei Peng was synonymous with invincibility, a truly famous heavenly general. In the Xinxiao world he belonged to, it seemed that no one was his opponent except for the demon Lord Chong Lu. Of course, that mysterious heavenly emperor doesn't count. Even the later appearance of the evil sword immortal was extremely wary of Fei Peng, and this evil sword immortal was later dealt with by Fei Peng's reincarnation, Jing Tian. But it is undeniable that Fei Peng was the strongest general in the entire divine realm. After reading the introduction about divine general Fei Peng, Chu Fan leisurely clicked on Fei Peng's cultivation realm. And this time, divine general Fei Peng's cultivation realm did not disappoint Chu Fan. He was not someone who had just entered the Quasi-Emperor realm, but had already reached the Quasi-Emperor late stage. Although his realm was still some distance from the peak Quasi-Emperor realm, no matter what, Fei Peng was now the Great Xia dynasty's first Quasi-Emperor realm expert. Moreover, Fei Peng, holding the demon suppressing sword, would certainly not be weaker than an ordinary peak Quasi-Emperor realm cultivator. After all, no matter what, he was the legendary divine General Fei Peng. This unlimited summoning card has truly given me a great trump card. Now, even if I enter the central domain, I no longer need to fear other forces. After seeing the characters summon this time, Chu Fan also let out a long breath, and at the same time, when his gaze swept towards the central domain, his entire being was radiant with spirit. At this moment, he knew that even if he led the Great Xia dynasty into the central domain, he could become a top-tier force in the central domain. After all, those Quasi-Emperor level experts in the central domain rarely appeared anymore, while Fei Peng on his side could act at any time. However, wanting to unify the entire central domain was still extremely difficult. In the central domain, any holy land had Quasi-Emperor level experts in slumber. Moreover, the number of Quasi-Emperor level experts in these holy lands was not small. Tianxian Holy Land alone had 5 or 6 Quasi-Emperor level experts sleeping. What's more, these top holy lands also possessed great Emperor level foundations, which could naturally allow them to easily contend with Quasi-Emperor realm experts. This was also why the Heavenly Dao Alliance feared these holy lands so much. Although there were Quasi-Emperor level experts in the Heavenly Dao Alliance, and their number of Quasi-Emperor level experts was not small, truly subduing these holy lands was still extremely difficult. After summoning the characters and armies this time, Chu Fan also arranged their respective positions. At the same time, Chu Fan also began to open his system mission panel. After he unified the Eastern Domain and established the Great Xia Dynasty, his system mission panel now displayed dozens of system missions. Among them, the most difficult to achieve was probably the first system mission, but this first system mission also greatly tempted Chu Fan. The first system mission was called National Ascension, and its requirement was for Chu Fan to lead the Great Xia dynasty to ascend and become the Great Xia Immortal Dynasty. That is, for Chu Fan to lead the Great Xia dynasty to find the so-called Immortal Domain, then successfully upgrade the Great Xia dynasty to the Great Xia Immortal Dynasty. However, to achieve this, the Great Xia dynasty must not lack great emperor-level experts. Otherwise, without great emperor-level experts, how could Chu Fan possibly complete this mission? And the reward for completing this mission was even more terrifying. It would elevate Chu Fan's innate Dao Body to the innate sacred body Dao Fetus. At the same time, he would be rewarded with 100,000 years of cultivation and 50 billion national destiny value. In addition, there were 10 great emperor-level summoning cards, which meant that completing this mission could summon 10 great emperor-level experts. Of course, just the 50 billion national destiny value made Chu Fan very eager. After all, 100 billion national destiny value could be exchanged for Panga's essence blood, and 500 billion national destiny value could summon the Tontian sect master. Therefore, Chu Fan was naturally very eager for this 50 billion national destiny value. But this system mission was not something Chu Fan should be thinking about right now. Thinking about what he should do now, Chu Fan also scrolled the system missions to the bottom. The system missions at the bottom were the easiest for Chu Fan to complete. The first mission, counting from the bottom up, was to unify the entire Northern Domain, making the entire Northern Domain completely the territory of the Great Xia dynasty. For Chu Fan, this mission presented no great difficulty, and the reward for this mission was also moderate. Upon completing the mission, he would be rewarded with 3 Great Saint-level summoning cards, 10 Saint King-level summoning cards, 1 Army summoning card, and also 1 cultivation advancement card for Chu Fan. That is to say, this cultivation advancement card could increase Chu Fan's cultivation by 1 minor realm. Even if he was currently at the Great Sage Perfection realm, he could still advance to the Quasi-Emperor realm. And currently, Chu Fan's cultivation was about to break through to the Great Saint realm, so he cared deeply about this cultivation advancement card. The second mission, counting from the bottom up, was to unify the Western Domain, incorporating the Western Domain into the territory of the Great Xia dynasty. However, the reward for this mission was much less than that of the Northern Domain mission. Upon completing the mission, he would only be rewarded with 1 Great Saint-level summoning card and 5 Saint King-level summoning cards. Other rewards included a minor realm increase for summon characters below Saint King. For Chu Fan now, this mission didn't offer much improvement, but of course, this mission was also the simplest. After all, most of the characters he summoned had already break through to the Saint King realm, and even those who hadn't break through to the Saint King realm were not far from it. The subsequent third mission and the 2 missions after that were similar. That was to unify the Southern Domain, incorporating the Southern Domain into the territory of the Great Xia dynasty. However, the reward for this mission was slightly better than the rewards for the previous 2 missions. There were 2 more Great Saint-level summoning cards alone, not to mention a bottle of other marrow-cleansing medicinal pills. It should be known that marrow-cleansing medicinal pills can improve a person's aptitude. No matter how foolish you are, after taking the marrow-cleansing medicinal pill, your talent can be elevated to the level of a genius. And if your talent reaches the level of a genius, you can enter the level of a prodigy with a marrow-cleansing medicinal pill. Although this kind of medicinal pill did not have much effect on Chu Fan, it had a great effect on Chu Long and others, so Chu Fan also valued this mission greatly. Chapter 367 Zhao Zilong arrives at the border of the Tianyuan dynasty in the desolate desert. Just as Chu Fan finished reading all the system tasks, he began to look forward to the upcoming system tasks. Their primary objective this time was to conquer the entire northern region and bring it under their control. At that time, the strength of their Great Xia dynasty would be greatly enhanced. After all, there were already many Saint King level and Great Saint level experts in the current Great Xia dynasty, and after resolving the northern region, 3 more Great Saint level experts and 10 Saint King level experts would be added. Moreover, there was also a cultivation enhancement card that could improve his own cultivation, so the strength of the Great Xia dynasty would definitely improve rapidly. Furthermore, resolving the northern region was also very easy. The strongest expert in the northern region was merely at the perfected Saint King realm, although the strongest he displayed to the world was only late Saint King. But Chu Fan did not believe that a late Saint King cultivator could not break through to the perfected Saint King realm. After all, there was only 1 minor realm difference between late Saint King and perfected Saint King realm, and there wasn't a huge gap between late Saint King and perfected Saint King realm. It could be achieved through time. This was also why Chu Fan believed that the northern region possessed a cultivator at the perfected Saint King realm. Of course, even if the northern region had a cultivator at the perfected Saint King realm, it posed no great threat to him. Just Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu's cultivation had already reached late Saint King, and their combined strength was terrifyingly powerful. The two late Saint King cultivators could resolve a cultivator at the perfected Saint King realm. At the same time, Zhao Zilong and others, under the arrangement of several great strategists, began to launch attacks on the surrounding imperial dynasties. First, Zhao Zilong led 100,000 troops towards the Tianyuan dynasty, which was the closest to where Chu Fan and his forces were currently located. Therefore, Zhao Zilong was the first to arrive at the Tianyuan dynasty. The Tianyuan dynasty, as one of the imperial dynasties in the northern region, was also one of the three major vassal states of the Shuanghua Empire. The highest cultivation of the imperial family in the Tianyuan dynasty had already reached the perfected saint realm. Among them, their saint entry-level cultivators numbered in the dozens, but because there were no Saint King level experts in the Tianyuan dynasty, although they were the top imperial dynasty within the entire Shuanghua Empire, they could not compare to those families that possessed Saint King level experts. The Tianyuan dynasty was located north of the Shuanghua Empire, meaning it was very far from the capital of the Shuanghua Empire. This also made the Tianyuan dynasty one of the most prosperous imperial dynasties. At this moment, the Tianyuan dynasty was unaware that its doomsday was approaching. The emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty, was currently discussing matters concerning the Shuanghua Empire in the main hall. 2 days had passed since the incident with the Ouyang family, and the Tianyuan dynasty had naturally received news of the changes within the Ouyang family. Therefore, the Tianyuan dynasty had gathered its ministers to discuss how to handle this matter. Although they were also a vassal state of the Shuanghua Empire, they were still an imperial dynasty, so they naturally needed to handle the events concerning the Ouyang family with extreme caution. Reporting to your majesty, this old minister believes we should not interfere in this upheaval. After all, our Tianyuan dynasty is insignificant in the eyes of the Ouyang family. They could even send a single Saint King level expert to inflict devastating damage upon us. Not to mention the Shuanghua Empire's army is not something we can resist. The old minister then slowly spoke to Emperor of Tianyuan dynasty, saying that although Emperor of Tianyuan dynasty was the Emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty, he still had to respect the opinions of the Tianyuan dynasty's ministers. Moreover, this old minister was a renowned old minister within the Tianyuan dynasty. Of course, the main reason was that the Ouyang family possessed Saint King level experts. Otherwise, who could resist the lure of immense profits? The other ministers also nodded in agreement after hearing the old minister's words, as they did not want the Tianyuan dynasty to provoke a Saint King level existence. Although a single Saint King level expert might not be able to destroy their Tianyuan dynasty, there were many Saint King level experts in the Shuanghua Empire, and their army was far stronger than theirs. Therefore, if the Tianyuan dynasty were to face the Shuanghua Empire, they would not even have a chance to react. Emperor of Tianyuan dynasty came to his senses after hearing the minister's words. Then he helplessly waved his hand and adjourned the court. The matter thus ended. However, what the Emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty, did not know at this moment was that a terrifying army was already approaching their Tianyuan dynasty. The owner of this army was Zhao Zilong, who, on his white horse and silver spear, was slowly leading the army behind him towards the Tianyuan dynasty. Among the army Zhao Zilong led this time, there were 10 Saint entry-level cultivators alone, and besides himself, there was also a vice-general who was a Saint King level expert. As for the other troops, their cultivation was all above the Grotto Heaven realm. It was said that this army could easily crush the Tianyuan dynasty. This was also why Zhao Zilong did not want to lead too many Saint entry-level cultivators. Another reason was that all the Saint entry-level cultivators and Saint King level cultivators from Chun Jibao's army were integrated together. They then formed a 1,000-man unit. This 1,000-man unit could sweep across the entire empire. Once Zhao Zilong and others had dealt with the surrounding imperial dynasties, this army could follow Chun Jibao directly into the empire. It could be said that this army was even stronger than the Great Snow Dragon cavalry. Soon, the army led by Zhao Zilong had already appeared at the border pass of the Tianyuan dynasty. The border pass of the Tianyuan dynasty was built in a desert. Outside the pass was an endless desert, while inside the pass was the flourishing Tianyuan dynasty. At this moment, Zhao Zilong was leading his army rapidly through the desert. As their army passed, the surrounding yellow sands rose, briefly concealing their figures. However, as it was an endless desert, the soldiers at the Tianyuan dynasty's border pass still noticed something amiss outside. General, it seems an army is approaching us, but because of the flying yellow sand, we cannot see clearly. On the city wall of the Tianyuan dynasty's border pass, a vice-general whose cultivation had reached the Dharma aspect realm looked at the general beside him, who was wearing black armor, and said worriedly. After speaking, his eyes stared intently at the flying yellow sand outside, as if trying to discern something from within the sand. In front of him, the general in black armor frowned, then slowly turned his gaze towards the desolate desert outside. Chapter 368 Terrifying Strength, easily taking down a city. As a general of the Tianyuan dynasty's border, this general, clad in black armor, had already reached the king realm. Therefore, what he could see at this moment was far more than what the deputy general had just seen. He now gazed through the yellow sand and saw the dark figures within it, moving towards them. Although he couldn't discern the faces of these dark figures, this general of the Tianyuan dynasty had discovered that the qi emanating from them had reached an extremely terrifying level. At the same time, the silver-white light at the very front of these dark figures made him feel an immense terror, as if this silver-white light could extinguish his life at any moment. Thinking of this, the face of the general at the Tianyuan dynasty's border instantly showed a look of shock, and he began to stare intently at the yellow sand below. "Everyone, be alert. Our enemies should be here." At the same time, he spoke with a solemn expression to the soldiers on the city wall, and his order quickly spread throughout the entire city wall. The cultivation of these soldiers of the Tianyuan dynasty on the city wall was not particularly weak, but compared to the army led by Zhao Zilong, it was far inferior. As Zhao Zilong led his army, slowly approaching the border of the Tianyuan dynasty, the shock this army brought to the Tianyuan dynasty's border began to slowly emerge. The ground began to tremble, as if even the earth was announcing their arrival. With each tremor, they steadily approached the border of the Tianyuan dynasty. The forehead of the general of the Tianyuan dynasty, clad in black armor, also broke out in a cold sweat, because at this moment he felt the terrifying qi within this army. Any one of them could easily crush him. At the same time, the general of the Tianyuan dynasty was also very puzzled. Such a formidable army, apart from an empire, it seemed no other imperial dynasty could field one, right? Was there anything in their Tianyuan dynasty worth an empire making a move for? Just as the general of the Tianyuan dynasty was still pondering what in their Tianyuan dynasty was worth an empire's action, Zhao Zilong had already led his army to the outside of the Tianyuan dynasty's border city. At this time, Zhao Zilong naturally saw the generals and soldiers on the city wall of the Tianyuan dynasty's border. When he saw the general of the Tianyuan dynasty, clad in black armor, a look of disdain appeared on his face. Although Zhao Zilong had expected that the strength of the generals in the Tianyuan dynasty was not very high, he had not expected that the strength of the general of the Tianyuan dynasty he encountered this time was merely at the king realm. One must know that the number of king realm soldiers in the army he led had already far exceeded several hundred, which meant that any squad leader from his army could serve as a general at the Tianyuan dynasty's border. Who goes there? Do you know this is the border of my Tianyuan dynasty? If you do not wish to be an enemy of my Tianyuan dynasty, then please retreat. The black-armored general of the Tianyuan dynasty also saw Zhao Zilong, the leader of this army, at this moment. After sensing the mysterious qi emanating from Zhao Zilong, the general of the Tianyuan dynasty instantly felt as if he had seen a heavenly god, and a terrifying image appeared in his mind. At the same time, he felt as if he was merely an ant standing before this heavenly god. However, as a general of the Tianyuan dynasty, he naturally could not surrender to Zhao Zilong so easily, so he looked at Zhao Zilong with a solemn gaze. At the same time, he also stated that although this was merely the border of the Tianyuan dynasty, anyone who entered here would be an enemy of their Tianyuan dynasty. One must know that no matter what, there were saint-level experts in the Tianyuan dynasty. Take him down! Zhao Zilong had no intention of wasting words with the general at the Tianyuan dynasty's border. Instead, he calmly spoke to a saint-grade general beside him. And this saint-grade general, upon hearing Zhao Zilong's words, looked intently at the general on the Tianyuan dynasty's border. Although the cultivation of this black-armored general was merely at the king realm, no matter what, this was his first battle. The general of the Tianyuan dynasty was stunned for a moment after hearing Zhao Zilong's words, but he quickly reacted, looking at Zhao Zilong with a resentful expression. He had not expected that this divine general, whom he felt was like a heavenly god descending, would treat him with such contempt. Fire arrows! Fire arrows at them! He then disregarded everything and directly spoke to the soldiers of the Tianyuan dynasty's border around him. And these soldiers, upon hearing their general's words, all shot their arrows towards Zhao Zilong and the others below. A dense rain of arrows instantly filled the sky, as if the end of the world had arrived. These were the arrows shot by soldiers with weak cultivation. The saint-grade general beside Zhao Zilong, upon seeing this scene, also quickly ascended into the air. He saw the spiritual qi around him continuously gathering towards him. Subsequently, an invisible protective shield appeared around him, and these arrows completely shattered upon encountering this invisible protective shield. Seeing this, the Saint-grade general gestured to an arrow in front of him. Then, this arrow appeared in his hand, and this Saint-grade general directly threw the arrow out. And this arrow directly tore through the surrounding space, then directly pierced through the defending general of the Tianyuan dynasty's border. A saint-level expert. The defending general of the Tianyuan dynasty, clad in black armor, only realized before his death that the one who killed him was a saint-level expert. And the other soldiers of the Tianyuan dynasty, seeing this scene, were all shocked. After the shock, many soldiers' faces showed a look of despair. They had not expected that their general, who was unfathomable to them, would be so easily slain by an enemy. While their faces still bore expressions of shock, Zhao Zilong also directly waved his hand at the Tianyuan dynasty's border in front of him. Then, the soldiers around him directly charged towards the Tianyuan dynasty's border. Their terrifying power instantly broke open the main gate of the Tianyuan dynasty's border. What followed was a feast of slaughter, and these soldiers of the Tianyuan dynasty, seeing that they could not escape, all surrendered. It could be said that this great battle ended before it even truly began. Zhao Zilong also took down the Tianyuan dynasty's border with the fastest speed. The number of cities owned by the Tianyuan dynasty and the imperial dynasties of the eastern region did not differ much. The Tianyuan dynasty had a total of over 100 cities, and Zhao Zilong took one city without any effort. Chapter 369, The Terrifying Speed of Advancement, shocked the Tianyuan dynasty. After taking this city of the Tianyuan dynasty, Zhao Zilong did not intend to stay. He merely left behind one captain at the King Realm and 100 soldiers before leaving this city of the Tianyuan dynasty. It must be known that a King Realm cultivator was already considered a towering figure at the border of the Tianyuan dynasty. Therefore, the King Realm captain and 100 Grotto Heaven Realm soldiers Zhao Zilong left behind were sufficient for them to completely secure the border regions of the Tianyuan dynasty. Moreover, the descent of Zhao Zilong and his forces, like heavenly god, naturally prevented the soldiers of the Tianyuan dynasty from harboring any rebellious thoughts. Following this, Zhao Zilong immediately led his army toward the imperial capital of the Tianyuan dynasty, killing all the way. In just 3 days, Zhao Zilong had already conquered half of the Tianyuan dynasty. At the same time, whenever a city was conquered, Zhao Zilong would dispatch a King Realm captain and 100 Grotto Heaven Realm soldiers to accompany him and secure that city. Thus, the majority of the Tianyuan dynasty's territory had completely fallen and become the territory of the Great Xia dynasty. The armies and common people of the Tianyuan dynasty also defected one after another to the Great Xia dynasty. After all, for these common people and cultivators, it made no difference who ruled them. During these 3 days, with so much territory of the Tianyuan dynasty falling, the imperial capital of the Tianyuan dynasty naturally received this news. However, they never imagined that such a terrifying army could take over the majority of their territory at such an astonishing speed. Where did this army come from? To possess such terrifying speed and strength, even the top armies of the empires probably wouldn't be much better. Inside the main hall of the Tianyuan dynasty, a prince of the Tianyuan dynasty stared at the battle report, his eyes filled with disbelief. He had not expected that in just a few days, the majority of their Tianyuan dynasty would fall. Moreover, this speed was still accelerating. This meant that soon, this army would reach their location. Thinking of this, a trace of worry appeared in the hearts of the other officials. Perhaps this army was dispatched by the neighboring Xiaoyao Empire. After all, the strongest forces in our northern region, besides the Shuanghua Empire, are only the Xiaoyao Empire. They might have taken action now, seeing that the Shuanghua Empire is embroiled in internal strife, because even the Ouyang family couldn't possibly rush here to support us so quickly. As the prince finished speaking, an official slowly stepped forward and spoke, his face bearing a look of deep, irrepressible worry. Upon hearing the official's words, expressions of worry also appeared on the faces of the others. As the Tianyuan dynasty of the northern region, they naturally knew the hegemonic powers of the northern region. Besides the Shuanghua Empire, the other dominant force was the Xiaoyao Empire. The strength of the Xiaoyao Empire was not far off from the strength of the empire they were affiliated with. It could even be said that the strength of the two great empires had reached a state of equilibrium. Otherwise, the slightly stronger empire would have already unified the northern region. Since the Ouyang family was caught in internal strife, they speculated that the force mobilizing this time must be experts from the Xiaoyao Empire. Upon hearing the official's words, Emperor of Tianyuan dynasty rubbed his head, feeling a severe headache. After hearing the official's statement, he also had some conjectures in his heart. If that is the case, then how should our Tianyuan dynasty respond to this army now? However, at this moment, he naturally could not panic. Instead, he spoke to the assembled officials with a solemn expression. Nevertheless, one could see an undeniable look of gloom on his face. Imperial brother, your subject and younger brother believes that even if the Xiaoyao Empire deployed troops this time, they wouldn't send overly powerful figures. If they sent a Saint King level expert, then the Ouyang family, no matter how chaotic its internal strife, would not choose to stand by. Therefore, your subject and younger brother thinks we should now summon all the Saint entry-level masters of the Imperial Dynasty and have them resist this army. The prince of the Tianyuan Dynasty who had spoken first slowly stood up and spoke, while also speculating that the Xiaoyao Empire could not possibly send overly powerful individuals. Although the Ouyang family was indeed caught up in internal strife. But if the Xiaoyao Empire were to send a Saint King-level expert into the empire ruled by the Ouyang family, how could the Ouyang family let the matter rest? Therefore, they speculated that there were no Saint King-level experts among the troops supposedly sent by the Xiaoyao Empire this time. What they did not know, however, was that this army was not the so-called Xiaoyao Empire's army, but the army of the Great Xia Dynasty, which they had never heard of. Once they became subordinates of the Great Xia Dynasty, they would understand just how powerful the Great Xia Dynasty truly was. After hearing the prince's words, Emperor of Tianyuan Dynasty silently nodded. Currently, the Tianyuan Dynasty seemed to have no other option besides this course of action. After all, the Ouyang family currently couldn't be bothered with them. Subsequently, Emperor of Tianyuan Dynasty ordered all the Saint entry-level experts of the Tianyuan Dynasty to go and stop this force. This also included their imperial family's old ancestor. As the Saint entry-level experts of the Tianyuan Dynasty went out, the imperial capital of the Tianyuan Dynasty also began to stir. After all, how could such a major event be concealed from them? Therefore, some cultivators in the Tianyuan Dynasty began planning how to leave the Tianyuan Dynasty. I didn't expect that just as the empire erupted in internal strife, such an army would appear in the Tianyuan Dynasty. It seems I should leave the Tianyuan Dynasty sooner rather than later. Indeed, I originally planned to cultivate in the central region of the empire after the internal strife ended, but now it seems I should head there early to cultivate. I just don't know if the empire will support the Tianyuan Dynasty this time. If the empire supports the Tianyuan Dynasty, this crisis might quickly pass. Who cares if the empire supports the Tianyuan Dynasty or not? I'm leaving the Tianyuan Dynasty quickly, as I won't risk my life gambling here. Alas, is the only option truly to leave the Tianyuan Dynasty? At this moment, many cultivators within the Tianyuan Dynasty were thinking about how to leave the Tianyuan Dynasty. Of course, some of these cultivators had come to the Tianyuan Dynasty when the Ouyang family's internal strife erupted. After all, in the empire, they would have to face the erupting Ouyang family. They might get dragged into it then. But now the Tianyuan Dynasty had to face an even more terrifying force. So why should they stay here and face this dreadful force alongside the Tianyuan Dynasty? It must be noted that this force had conquered the majority of the Tianyuan Dynasty's territory in just a few days. Therefore, in their view, how could this force be weak? Chapter 370 From Lu Bu to the 100 Battle Dynasty. The differences between the 100 Battle Dynasty and other dynasties. Just as the Saint entry-level experts of the Tianyuan Dynasty were heading to the front line. At this time, Zhao Zilong and the others were also advancing toward the territory of the Tianyuan Dynasty at the fastest speed. Moreover, each time, they took less than the time it takes for an incense stick to burn to capture the city before them. It can be said that if it were not for the army following behind them, it would definitely be very easy for Zhao Zilong to capture the entire Tianyuan Dynasty. However, in war, it is naturally impossible for him, a Saint King-level expert, to directly attack the imperial capital of the Tianyuan Dynasty. Even if he dealt with the imperial family of the Tianyuan Dynasty, the generals in the remaining cities would still need to be dealt with. Therefore, Zhao Zilong and Chun Jibao, and perhaps all generals in this world, must fight slowly from the beginning until the end. Just as Zhao Zilong launched a war against the Tianyuan Dynasty, on the other side, Lu Bu was the second person to lead an army and appear in front of an imperial dynasty. The imperial dynasty that Lu Bu attacked was also within the Shuanghua Empire, but the 100 Battles dynasty he attacked was a certain distance away from the Tianyuan Dynasty. This is why Zhao Zilong had already captured more than half of the Tianyuan Dynasty when Lu Bu only just arrived at the 100 Battles dynasty. There is also a big difference between the 100 Battles dynasty and the Tianyuan Dynasty. Although the Tianyuan Dynasty was established at the border of the Shuanghua Empire, the Tianyuan Dynasty was relatively stable compared to other imperial dynasties. However, the situation of the 100 Battles dynasty was different from that of the Tianyuan Dynasty. The founding of the 100 Battles dynasty could be seen just from the name 100 Battles. The 100 Battles dynasty was an imperial dynasty established in a place within the Shuanghua Empire where internal strife often occurred. Because internal strife often occurred here, martial arts were highly respected within the 100 Battles dynasty. That is to say, in the 100 Battles dynasty, as long as your strength reached the level they recognized, you could serve as the city lord of the city or directly as an offering to the imperial dynasty. Furthermore, if your strength reached the Saint King level, it was possible for the entire 100 Battles dynasty to venerate you. Because the 100 Battles dynasty revered martial arts, the 100 Battles dynasty was the strongest imperial dynasty in the entire northern region. At this moment, Lu Bu also led his army to appear outside the 100 Battles dynasty. Looking at the border pass of the 100 Battles dynasty, a hint of excited smile appeared on Lu Bu's face. This excited smile on his face was also filled with cruelty. Those who knew Lu Bu's temper knew that he had already entered combat mode. The arrival of the large army, led by Lu Bu, also attracted the attention of the soldiers and generals of the 100 Battles dynasty. At the same time, the surrounding cultivators also quickly avoided the army brought by Lu Bu. For these cultivating cultivators, they naturally did not want to participate in the great wars between nations. After all, no matter how high their cultivation was, they were only at the Dharma idol and king realm. Such cultivation might be considered good among the cultivators. But among this terrifying army, their strength was not the strongest, especially if an army besieged them. Then no matter how strong they were, they would not be able to escape. If your strength is above the entering saint realm, then you can naturally escape. After all, cultivators at the entering saint realm can already change the rules between heaven and earth. And the cultivation of this general of the Baijian dynasty had also reached the king realm. Clearly, the gap between the 100 Battles dynasty and the Tianyuan dynasty was not very large. However, it could be seen that the soldiers of the 100 Battles dynasty were all emitting a fierce qi, which ordinary soldiers did not possess. When Lu Bu saw these soldiers of the 100 Battles dynasty emitting a fierce qi, he wore a look of regret. If these soldiers were handed over to him for training, he would definitely train them to be even more terrifying than this. To be able to raise the strength of soldiers to a very high level truly requires a powerful general commander. And Lu Bu happened to be able to achieve this. After all, his Bingzhou Iron Cavalry was a famous existence during the Three Kingdoms period. Who is below the city? Do you not know that this is the territory of my 100 Battles dynasty? Although the general of the 100 Battles dynasty above felt the terrifying qi on Lu Bu, which resembled a demon god, he still looked at Lu Bu seriously and asked. However, the solemn expression on the face of the general of the 100 Battle city could no longer be maintained. Lu Bu of the great Xia dynasty. If you open the gates and surrender, I can spare your lives. Otherwise, this general will surely slaughter every member of your clan. Lu Bu looked at the general of the 100 Battles dynasty before him and spoke arrogantly. After speaking, the terrifying qi on his body instantly enveloped the general and soldiers of the 100 Battles dynasty. At this moment, Lu Bu seemed like a true god or demon descended upon the world. When this general of the Baijian dynasty felt the terrifying qi on Lu Bu, he felt his body sink. He even had a feeling in his heart that he couldn't fight back. Even wanting to swing the weapon in his hand was extremely difficult. All of this was caused by the terrifying pressure emanating from Lu Bu. This is my 100 Battles dynasty. Does the great Xia dynasty really want to be enemies with my 100 Battles dynasty? The great generals of my 100 Battles dynasty have reached the entering saint realm. Although this general of the Baijian dynasty wore a look of worry, he still spoke to Lu Bu calmly. At the same time, he reminded Lu Bu that there were saint entry-level experts in the 100 Battles dynasty, and these saint entry-level experts were also great generals. I don't even put saint entry-level ants in my eyes. Today, I only ask you one thing: surrender or not. If you don't surrender, then I will attack the city. After hearing the words of the general of the 100 Battles dynasty, Lu Bu did not take his words seriously at all, but instead laughed loudly as he spoke to the general of the 100 Battles dynasty. After speaking, he looked eagerly at the city of the 100 Battles dynasty. At this moment, it seemed as if he could no longer resist attacking the city of the 100 Battles dynasty. When this general of the Baijian dynasty heard Lu Bu's words, his heart instantly sank to the bottom. Then, he looked at Lu Bu with eyes full of loneliness and unwillingness. In that case, then I asked the general to attack the city. Then, he cupped his hands toward Lu Bu and spoke seriously. After finishing, he stood on the city wall holding a black long spear. Although the cultivation of this general of the 100 Battles dynasty was not high, his current actions made Lu Bu's eyes light up. After all, if this general of the 100 Battles dynasty had truly surrendered to him, although Lu Bu would have recruited him, he would definitely look down on this general of the 100 Battles dynasty. But now, the actions of this general of the 100 Battles dynasty truly made Lu Bu regard him highly. Chapter 371: The Territories of the Six Great Dynasties Falling One After Another, and Ouyang Baishan's Bizarre Actions. That kind of cowardly wretch would not die by Lu Bu's hands. Since that is the case, then this general shall take your life for the heavens." Then Lu Bu gazed calmly at this general of the 100 Battles dynasty before him and spoke. After speaking, the aura belonging to the Saint King realm completely erupted from him. Then a purple longbow appeared in his hand, and then Lu Bu began to knock and shoot an arrow. A purple arrow streaked across the sky and appeared directly in front of this general of the 100 Battles dynasty. Then, without any hesitation, it directly pierced through his chest. This general of the Baijian dynasty also closed his eyes calmly at this moment. He had not expected that he would die so tragically one day. Until death, he did not understand that he had actually died at the hands of a Saint King level expert. However, for him, dying at the hands of a Saint King level expert was quite worthwhile. After all, a mere King Realm cultivator actually died at the hands of a Saint King level expert. After Lu Bu dealt with this general of the 100 Battles dynasty, he directly led the soldiers behind him and charged into the 100 Battles dynasty. Lu Bu's actions were even more decisive than Zhao Zilong's. He charged towards the 100 Battles dynasty alone on horseback, slaying all soldiers and generals who dared to stop him. Thus, he only took 2 days to occupy more than half of the 100 Battles dynasty. And Lu Bu, this figure who was like a demon god, instantly became famous in the 100 Battles dynasty. Many people respectfully called Lu Bu the demon god. And the cultivators in the cities of the 100 Battles dynasty also surrendered to Lu Bu one after another. After all, most cultivators in the 100 Battles dynasty worshipped the strong. Since Lu Bu achieved this alone on horseback, they naturally admired Lu Bu greatly. Therefore, the speed at which Lu Bu subdued the 100 Battles dynasty was faster than the speed at which Zhao Zilong subdued the Tianyuan dynasty. Even though Lu Bu started after Zhao Zilong, it is likely that it won't be long before he subdues the 100 Battles dynasty, perhaps even before Zhao Zilong subdues the Tianyuan dynasty. When the royal family of the 100 Battles dynasty learned that a demon god had directly charged into their 100 Battles dynasty, they began to discuss how to deal with this demon god. The problems faced by the 100 Battles dynasty were similar to those faced by the Tianyuan dynasty, although they could both request the Ouyang family to intervene. But the Ouyang family currently did not have that much time to intervene, and judging by the speed of Lu Bu and Zhao Zilong, even if they requested the Ouyang family to intervene, the 2 imperial dynasties would already be annihilated before they had a chance to return. Panic began to spread among the 100 Battles dynasty's royal family. However, the 100 Battles dynasty also dispatched saint-level experts to stop Lu Bu at this time. Although they did not know exactly how powerful Lu Bu's cultivation was, the royal family members of the 100 Battles dynasty guessed that Lu Bu's cultivation should only be in the entering saint realm. After all, an entering saint realm cultivator could already sweep through the cities of their 100 Battles dynasty, and the cultivation of the generals in the 100 Battles dynasty cities was mostly in the king realm. Only the city lords, or generals in the top-tier cities, had cultivation reaching the true king realm. But there were not many generals and city lords in the 100 Battles dynasty who reached the true king realm. Moreover, the true king realm was nothing in front of an entering saint realm expert. While Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu launched their war against the 2 imperial dynasties, the 7 generals of the Yang family and Pei Yuanqing also launched attacks against the other 4 great dynasties. They were originally well-known figures in history, and this time, those who were summoned were even more powerful. Thus, in just a few days, most of the imperial dynasties were lost. And as the major imperial dynasties slowly began to fall, the 2 empires of the northern region also noticed that something was wrong at this time. After all, the 2 empires had their own informants. So, as the 6 great dynasties continuously fell one after another, they naturally received the news. In the imperial capital of the Shuanghua Empire at this time, Ouyang Batian, with his white hair, was sitting on a high platform. Although he was the ultimate victor in this great war, his own life was now short. It could be said that if his lifespan was 1,000 years originally, now he only had a few decades left. The reason Ouyang Batian was still holding the position of emperor of the Shuanghua Empire was mainly for the sake of his descendants and his lineage. Otherwise, he would not be able to hold on much longer. I can still live for 30 years. I hope he can grow up during these 30 years. Ouyang Batian looked up at the sky with a grim expression. He was naturally well aware of his current lifespan. Therefore, he currently greatly anticipated Ouyang Lingshua's growth. Otherwise, Ouyang Batian knew what awaited Ouyang Lingshua. Reporting to Your Majesty, the 3 great dynasties within the empire have all been attacked by enemies, and now more than half of the land belonging to the 3 dynasties within the empire has fallen. Just as Ouyang Batian gazed calmly towards the sky, a middle-aged man wearing a purple-red robe appeared beside him. When this middle-aged man looked at Ouyang Batian, his eyes were filled with admiration. This person was Ouyang Batian's loyalist. During this great war, he had also held back a perfected Saint Realm expert, and his own cultivation had also reached the perfected Saint Realm. Have you found out who is attacking the three great dynasties? Ouyang Batian frowned after hearing the middle-aged man's words. He had not expected that someone would choose to attack the three great dynasties at this critical moment. At the same time, Ouyang Batian was constantly trying to figure out who would attack the three great dynasties. These armies do not seem to belong to our northern region, and your subordinate has never heard of their names in the northern region. After hearing Ouyang Batian's words, the middle-aged man replied to Ouyang Batian with a solemn expression. In the past few days, the names of Zhao Zilong and the others had naturally spread, but as Ouyang Batian's deputy, he still hadn't heard of these people. It seems someone has set their sights on our northern region. I just wonder how strong this enemy is. Ouyang Batian revealed a strange smile at this moment. At the same time, he seemed very pleased about the appearance of this enemy. Then he calmly looked towards the horizon. At this moment, even the middle-aged man beside him did not know what his master was thinking. We don't need to pay attention to them. Let's see if those old fogies will watch their own territories continuously fall. Then Ouyang Batian spoke to the middle-aged man beside him. After speaking, he ignored the confusion of the middle-aged man beside him, and his gaze slowly returned to his great hall. Chapter 372, The Su Family's Countermeasures, the ancestor of the Ouyang family's fury. In the following days, Ouyang Batian acted as if he had not heard the news that the three great dynasties within his empire were being attacked. Instead, he stayed in the imperial palace every day, doing nothing. Just because Ouyang Batian paid no attention to the three great dynasties in his empire did not mean that others were oblivious. At this time, the entire Shuanghua Empire began to fall into turmoil, and after waiting for several days, they realized that Your Majesty seemed to have no intention of dealing with this matter. Therefore, the cultivators near the three great dynasties rushed toward the capital city of the empire. Perhaps only the capital of the empire could protect them. Meanwhile, discussions began to spread throughout the imperial capital of the empire, as everyone speculated why Your Majesty was not sending aid to the three great dynasties. After all, the three great dynasties were, strictly speaking, their vassal states. If they did not support the three great dynasties, who would dare to become their subordinate in the future? What is going on with the emperor? Is he planning to just watch the three great dynasties fall? At this moment, Su Zhan of the Su family in the empire frowned as he looked toward the imperial palace after receiving this news. In the past few days, their three major families have been living cautiously under the shadow of the Ouyang family. After all, the actions Ouyang Batian took recently had completely affected the direction of the entire empire. Moreover, Ouyang Batian's last action resulted in the purge of tens of thousands of people, so the families in the imperial capital were now extremely quiet. Even the three major families remained very quiet at this time. However, when they learned that the three great dynasties within the empire were being attacked by other armies, the three major families were still somewhat surprised. What surprised the three major families even more was that Ouyang Batian actually chose to ignore this matter. Perhaps Ouyang Batian wants to see what the old ancestor of the Ouyang family plans to do. After all, the current Ouyang Batian probably wishes he could destroy the entire Ouyang family directly, so how could he possibly send troops to help the three great dynasties? The Su family ancestor sighed silently while looking toward the imperial palace, knowing naturally that Ouyang Batian's lifespan was not long. Therefore, he also guessed what Ouyang Batian intended to do. The old ancestor of the Ouyang family also knew the reason why Ouyang Batian's lifespan was short, which is why he continued to let him be the master of the empire. After all, no matter how much Ouyang Batian acted as the master of the empire, he could only do so for a few more decades. Perhaps a few decades is indeed a long time for ordinary people. But for an old monster like the old ancestor of the Ouyang family, who has lived for thousands of years, a few decades pass in the blink of an eye. If that is truly the case, then what path should our Su family take in the future? After hearing the Su family ancestor's words, a look of worry appeared on Su Zhan's face, and he gazed at his old ancestor with a troubled expression. Ever since the Ouyang family experienced this internal strife, Su Zhan had been worried about the future path of the Su family. Although all three of their families possessed Saint King level experts, it was still extremely difficult to leave the empire. After all, joining the empire was easy, but withdrawing from the empire was hard. The three major families now faced the same problem. No matter who took over as the master of the empire in the Ouyang family, it would not be of great benefit to their three major families. The three great dynasties lost most of their territory so quickly this time. Presumably, the empire's enemies are not weak. Perhaps we can start by approaching the empire's enemies. The Su family ancestor said something that Su Zhan found incredible, yet the Su family ancestor's face held a look of seriousness. It was as if this was a decision he had made after long consideration. Old ancestor, if we lose this gamble, our Su family will be doomed forever. Su Zhan naturally understood his old ancestor's meaning, so he slowly looked at his old ancestor and spoke worriedly, word by word. At this moment, he naturally knew that the army attacking the empire was not weak, but if their Su family lost the gamble, it would lead the entire Su family to eternal damnation. That is why we are waiting for an opportunity, waiting for the old ancestor of the Ouyang family to test just how powerful this enemy is. If even the old ancestor of the Ouyang family falls into the hands of this enemy, then we can approach the empire's enemies. The Su family ancestor said this to Su Zhan with a serious expression, and after speaking, his gaze drifted toward the imperial palace. At this moment, he understood that he could only gamble this one time. After all, if they won the gamble, their Su family would continue to survive in the northern region, perhaps even better than they were now. But if they lost the gamble, it would cost the lives of the entire Su family. All the Su family disciples might lose their lives because of this massive gamble. Will those old ancestors of the empire make a move? After hearing the Su family ancestor's words, Su Zhan also asked his old ancestor with a worried expression. At the same time, it was clear that his words carried a hint of temptation. They have no choice but to act. Otherwise, it will be very difficult for the Ouyang family to manage the empire in the future. After all, if they ignore even their 3 vassal states, how would anyone else dare to continue submitting to the empire? The Su family ancestor spoke to Su Zhan confidently after hearing his words, and afterward, his gaze continued to drift toward the imperial palace. Upon hearing his old ancestor's words, Su Zhan looked toward the imperial palace with anticipation. He also wanted to see if this enemy was truly worth the investment. Meanwhile, the other 2 major families also began holding discussions. Due to the importance of this matter, both families invited their respective old ancestors out. Their old ancestors' predictions were similar to those of the Su family ancestor, but the Wang family and the Zhao family did not choose to defect to the enemy. After all, having enjoyed such long stability, how could they return to a life of fear and anxiety? At this moment, the thoughts of the old ancestor of the Ouyang family were exactly as the old ancestors of the 3 major families had guessed. Several old ancestors of the Ouyang family had begun to revive themselves. After all, this incident was extremely important to their empire. I never thought that after thousands of years, someone would dare to challenge our empire. But is Ouyang Batian truly choosing to stand by and watch? One old ancestor, who was merely a mid-stage Saint King, spoke with eyes full of rage. He was not only angry that someone challenged their empire, but he was even angrier that Ouyang Batian chose to remain indifferent. He currently wished he could personally cripple Ouyang Batian. Chapter 373: The Actions of the 2 Great Empires. Zhao Zilong facing a 1,000,000-strong army. When they initially tolerated Ouyang Batian, they were already furious, but they never expected Ouyang Batian to do such a thing now. Therefore, the old ancestor of the Ouyang family from the Qingtian lineage was extremely enraged at this moment. If it weren't for Ouyang Batian's forbidden art, this old ancestor of the Ouyang family would probably have already gone to deal with Ouyang Batian. The other old ancestors also looked towards the imperial palace with anger. If he doesn't act, then we can only act ourselves. Otherwise, our empire, which the Ouyang family has ruled for tens of thousands of years, will collapse. The old ancestor of the Ouyang family, dressed in a white robe, also frowned and slowly spoke. At this moment, he naturally wished he could eliminate Ouyang Batian, but he also understood that whether it was eliminating Ouyang Batian or the current situation, both could lead to the downfall of their empire, which they had ruled for tens of thousands of years. Although eliminating Ouyang Batian would not destroy their empire, which they had ruled for tens of thousands of years. However, eliminating one Ouyang Batian would require sacrificing all the disciples of the Ouyang family, and the old ancestor of the Ouyang family naturally wouldn't choose to do so. Moreover, what's more important now are the armies of the 3 great dynasties that are attacking their empire. The most important task now is to deal with this army. Since 3 armies have appeared, let our 3 Saint King level old ancestors lead 1 army each to deal with them. I don't believe these 3 armies are that powerful. An old ancestor of the Ouyang family at the late Saint King also slowly stepped forward and spoke. He had not expected anyone to attack their empire at this time. So, at this moment, the old ancestor of the Ouyang family had a terrifying look of anger on his face. The other old ancestors of the Ouyang family also nodded in agreement after hearing his words, and it was clear that their faces also showed anger. They were clearly very angry at this army that was taking advantage of the situation. Lead the Silver Armor Army of the Empire. After all, the Silver Armor Army's speed far surpasses that of other armies. The old ancestor of the Ouyang family, dressed in white, also nodded after hearing the words of this Saint King. After all, no matter what, they had to put on a show for the world to see that their empire intended to handle this matter. Of course, more importantly, they also wanted to deliver a devastating blow to this army. After all, no one can tolerate an army invading their own territory. Subsequently, the three Saint King-level old ancestors of the Ouyang family led 3 armies respectively towards the 3 great dynasties. And this time, the 3 armies they led were precisely to support these 3 great dynasties. Of course, their main goal was to deal with the army that was invading the empire this time. However, what they didn't know was that once they left, they would have no chance of returning, and before they even reached the battlefield, the 3 great dynasties had already been annihilated. At this moment, Ouyang Batian, who was in the imperial palace, naturally sensed the change in the old ancestor of the Ouyang family, and then a strange smile appeared on his face. Ouyang Batian, with a strange smile, slowly entered a dark palace deep within the imperial palace. Clearly, Ouyang Batian was plotting something at this moment. The other 3 families, upon seeing the empire dispatch the Silver Armor Army, also began to feel curious about this great battle. After all, the Silver Armor Army was the most elite and most mobile army in the Shuanghua Empire. Just as the old ancestor of the Ouyang family on the Shuanghua Empire side led the Silver Armor Army out. At this moment, the Xiaoyao Empire on the other side naturally also received news of other armies attacking their 3 great dynasties. Thus, the Xiaoyao Empire also began to become tense at this moment. Initially, the Xiaoyao Empire was still laughing at the Ouyang family situation, but they never expected that in the blink of an eye, their empire would suffer such a fate. The enraged Xiaoyao Empire also directly dispatched 3 Saint King-level old ancestors to go to these 3 great dynasties to provide support. Clearly, the Xiaoyao Empire also intended for these 3 Saint King-level old ancestors to lead armies and directly annihilate the armies attacking the 3 great dynasties this time. However, what they didn't know was that this time, they had greatly underestimated the strength of the great Xia dynasty. Tianyuan dynasty, at this moment, more than half of the Tianyuan dynasty had fallen, and it could even be said that almost all of the Tianyuan dynasty's territory had fallen into the hands of the great Xia dynasty. However, the army of the Tianyuan dynasty at this moment had stopped Zhao Zilong's advance. This time, the army of the Tianyuan dynasty totaled 1 million strong, and more importantly, among the army dispatched by the Tianyuan dynasty this time, there were 9 Saint Realm cultivators. One must know that the Tianyuan dynasty only had a few dozen Saint Realm cultivators, yet 9 were dispatched this time. From this, one could see the importance the Tianyuan dynasty placed on this great battle. However, the 100,000-strong army, led by Zhao Zilong, appeared somewhat sparse and ordinary in front of this million-strong army. One could even feel that the army led by Zhao Zilong was much smaller than the army of the Tianyuan dynasty. However, this was also a normal situation, as the army led by Zhao Zilong was only 1/10 of the army dispatched by the Tianyuan dynasty this time. At this moment, the commander of the Tianyuan dynasty, standing in front of Zhao Zilong and the others, was a general at the Saint entry mid-stage. This general was a middle-aged man, dressed in a profound black battle armor, holding a black long spear. He looked at Zhao Zilong opposite him with a solemn gaze. "Your Excellency, who exactly are you, and why do you wish to attack my Tianyuan dynasty?" Then, this general of the Tianyuan dynasty looked at Zhao Zilong and spoke solemnly. After speaking, his gaze slowly turned towards the army behind Zhao Zilong. As a Saint Realm cultivator, he could naturally sense the power of the army behind Zhao Zilong. It could even be said that the army behind Zhao Zilong made him realize that even the empire did not have such a powerful army. "I am Zhao Zilong, the White Horse General of the Great Xia dynasty. Today, I have come to conquer the Tianyuan dynasty. You still have a chance if you surrender now. Otherwise, I will lead the army behind me to flatten the entire Tianyuan dynasty." Zhao Zilong looked at this general of the Tianyuan dynasty in front of him, slowly raised the dragon gallbladder bright silver spear in his hand, and then loudly spoke to the million-strong army of the Tianyuan dynasty. His voice was very loud, causing the entire million-strong army of the Tianyuan dynasty to hear his voice. However, no matter what, the million-strong army of the Tianyuan dynasty was still the foundation of the imperial dynasty. So, after hearing Zhao Zilong's words, they calmly stood in place, waiting for their general's command. At this moment, this general of the Tianyuan dynasty, after hearing Zhao Zilong's words, looked at Zhao Zilong with a solemn expression. He had just felt the domineering aura contained within Zhao Zilong's voice, as if even he was about to submit to this aura. Chapter 374 Clash between 2 armies, a brutal battlefield. It was as if Zhao Zilong, standing before him, was an insurmountable mountain. Does this general think that the army behind him can flatten my Tianyuan dynasty? However, for the sake of the Tianyuan dynasty, this general of the Tianyuan dynasty naturally would not choose to surrender so easily. Instead, he seriously questioned Zhao Zilong. Although he knew the strength of the army before him, he did not believe that Zhao Zilong could rely on this single army to flatten their Tianyuan dynasty. You could try. Now I will only give you the time it takes for half an incense stick to burn for consideration. Whether you surrender or die is up to your single thought, but this general advises you to consider carefully for the million-strong army behind you. After hearing the words of this general of the Tianyuan dynasty, Zhao Zilong calmly replied to this general of the Tianyuan dynasty once again. However, the domineering qi on his body was infinitely released at this moment, as if the entire battlefield was under his rule. At the same time, having finished speaking, Zhao Zilong calmly sat upon his white horse, his gaze lingering on the general of the Tianyuan dynasty in front of him. He was not in a hurry at this moment. After all, if he could subdue the million-strong army before him, it would also enhance the strength of the great Xia dynasty. Meanwhile, the general of the Tianyuan dynasty in front of Zhao Zilong looked solemnly towards Zhao Zilong's direction. At this moment, he was constantly fluctuating under Zhao Zilong's terrifying aura. At the same time, this general of the Tianyuan dynasty also knew that Zhao Zilong's words were not meant as a threat. It was as if he was merely narrating a fact. The several saint-level experts beside him also looked solemnly at Zhao Zilong's army. Marshal, no matter what you choose, we will support you. An elder in the initial saint realm slowly stepped forward and spoke to the general of the Tianyuan dynasty before him. After speaking, he also signaled for the several deputy generals beside him to nod toward this general of the Tianyuan dynasty. As for the other saint entry-level elders, they frowned upon hearing the words of this saint entry-level elder. This army is too powerful. Even ordinary soldiers have reached the Grotto Heaven realm. In front of such a powerful army, even if our numbers far exceed theirs, I am afraid we have no chance of victory. Another elder slowly stepped out at this moment and spoke to this general of the Tianyuan dynasty. Although he did not state his opinion at this time, based on his analysis of the army behind Zhao Zilong, his intention could be clearly guessed. At the same time, his words made everyone present feel solemn. After all, as Saint Realm cultivators, they could naturally see the cultivation level of the army behind Zhao Zilong. When they clearly saw the cultivation level of the army behind Zhao Zilong, they were all shocked, because they had not expected that the cultivation level of the army behind Zhao Zilong had all reached above the Grotto Heaven realm. Beside Zhao Zilong and the deputy general next to him, there were actually 10 saint-level experts, meaning the Saint Realm cultivators in Zhao Zilong's army were stronger than them. Moreover, this was excluding Zhao Zilong, the commander, and the deputy general beside him. And the strength of the army behind Zhao Zilong far surpassed theirs. From this perspective, they had no chance of victory. The other elders looked at this general of the Tianyuan dynasty with anticipation and melancholy. Although they would agree to any decision made by this general of the Tianyuan dynasty, if this general of the Tianyuan dynasty truly surrendered to the opposition, then what awaited the Tianyuan dynasty would be complete annihilation. After all, this large army of theirs already represented most of the power within the Tianyuan dynasty. If we surrender, wouldn't we be letting down your majesty's high regard and expectations for us? If we fight hard, we might still have a chance, but if we surrender, we will have no chance of turning the tables. After hearing their words, this general of the Tianyuan dynasty also began to ponder, but soon a look of determination appeared on his face. Although he did not know if they could stand against the army behind Zhao Zilong in this great battle. But as the general of the Tianyuan dynasty, how could he surrender without a fight? The other Saint Realm cultivators of the Tianyuan dynasty were somewhat surprised after hearing the words of this general of the Tianyuan dynasty. However, their eyes also began to firm up at this moment. Evidently, they were absolutely obeying the orders of this general of the Tianyuan dynasty at this time. Time passed bit by bit, and soon the time it takes for half an incense stick to burn had elapsed. During the time it took for half an incense stick to burn, this general of the Tianyuan dynasty had no intention of surrendering, nor was there any sign of surrender on the bodies of the deputy generals and soldiers around him. Seeing this scene, Zhao Zilong understood the final choice of the opposing army. Thereupon, he slowly raised the dragon gallbladder bright silver spear in his hand, and then slowly pointed the spear tip towards the million-strong army in front of him. Kill! Immediately afterward, a single word, kill, escaped his mouth, and a terrifying aura instantly emanated from Zhao Zilong's body. The Saint entry-level generals beside him instantly rode their war horses and charged out. At the same time, the army behind him also charged directly toward the million-strong army of the Tianyuan dynasty in front. The terrifying aura belonging to those above the Grotto Heaven realm completely erupted at this moment. The Grotto Heaven realm aura on every soldier seemed capable of swallowing the law between heaven and earth. As for Zhao Zilong, he remained mounted on his war horse, watching the great battle from his original position. The million-strong army of the Tianyuan dynasty was stunned when they sensed the aura emanating from the army brought by Zhao Zilong. But soon, they followed the footsteps of their general and charged toward the army brought by Zhao Zilong. The two armies collided directly, like a flood of steel. The moment they collided, blood instantly splattered everywhere. Blood immediately stained the site of the collision. The 10 Saint Realm cultivators on the Great Xia side also immediately sought out the Saint Realm cultivators on the Tianyuan dynasty side. The great battle between the Saint Realm cultivators thus unfolded. As for the army of the Great Xia dynasty, they easily cut through the million-strong army of the Tianyuan dynasty. The Tianyuan dynasty's million-strong army's intention to trap the Great Xia dynasty's army within their ranks was instantly neutralized. Moreover, the Great Xia dynasty's army was continuously slaughtering the Tianyuan dynasty's army around them. In just a moment, tens of thousands of the Tianyuan dynasty soldiers were slaughtered, and all of this happened in the blink of an eye. Chapter 375, the Tianyuan dynasty's million-strong army surrenders, and the Tianyuan dynasty general commits suicide. Moreover, this number was still continuously increasing. As time went by, the army of the Tianyuan dynasty also began to slowly dwindle. It could even be said that tens of thousands of people were dying on the battlefield every minute and every second. This was the shock caused by an army composed of powerhouses against ordinary armies. The general of the Tianyuan dynasty naturally noticed this sight, and with a grim expression, he fixed his gaze on Zhao Zilong, because at this moment, the only one who could change the outcome of this great battle was likely Zhao Zilong, clad in silver armor. Although the general of the Tianyuan dynasty could sense an extraordinary qi emanating from Zhao Zilong, he currently had no other option. Thereupon, this general of the Tianyuan dynasty was seen holding a long spear and charging toward Zhao Zilong. At this moment, he directly abandoned his mount. His entire person appeared in front of Zhao Zilong like a black bolt of lightning. The idea is good, but without strength, even the best intentions cannot change the tide of battle. Zhao Zilong agreed with the actions of this general of the Tianyuan dynasty. After all, if he, the commander of the Great Xia dynasty, were killed, the Great Xia dynasty army below would likely descend into chaos. After all, the death of an army's commander has a powerful impact on that force. However, what this general of the Tianyuan dynasty did not expect was that Zhao Zilong's strength had far exceeded his imagination. Subsequently, the Saint King level general beside Zhao Zilong also intended to take action. After all, if a Saint entry-level cultivator was worth their own general taking action, then what purpose did he serve? However, just as the Saint King level commander beside Zhao Zilong was about to make a move, Zhao Zilong directly waved his hand, telling him to step down. Immediately after, Zhao Zilong was seen transforming into a silver beam of light and disappearing from the spot. The silver spear stuck in the ground also disappeared from the spot along with him. In the next second, Zhao Zilong could be seen already appearing next to this general of the Tianyuan dynasty. Then, in the instant before this general of the Tianyuan dynasty could react, the dragon gallbladder bright silver spear in Zhao Zilong's hand was already pressed directly against his throat. You're still too weak. It can even be said that all the cultivators in the northern region are too weak. At the same time, Zhao Zilong's voice slowly drifted into the ear of this general of the Tianyuan dynasty. When this general of the Tianyuan dynasty felt the coldness at his throat and saw Zhao Zilong in front of him, an unprecedented look of despair appeared on his face. At the same time, a pale complexion could be seen amidst this despair. At this moment, he understood that the outcome of this great battle could not be reversed no matter what, since just the white horse general in front of him had already far exceeded his imagination. It could even be said that the white horse general in front of him had far exceeded the limits of what the Tianyuan dynasty could resist. Thinking of this, the long spear in the hand of the general of the Tianyuan dynasty slowly dropped, and he looked forlornly at the battlefield ahead. This general, usually renowned for his ferocity, did not even have a chance to resist in front of the other person. Looking at the battlefield where soldiers were constantly falling, the bitterness on the mouth of this general of the Tianyuan dynasty could no longer be concealed. Then, he turned around, cupped his hands toward Zhao Zilong, and gave a solemn bow. I beg the general to spare this army. Every one of them has family waiting for their return. After speaking, the bitterness in his eyes was released, no longer concealable. If you make them stop fighting, this general can spare their lives. After Zhao Zilong heard the words of this general of the Tianyuan dynasty, he nodded. After all, even if the battle continued, it would only take a little more time to completely slaughter this army of the Tianyuan dynasty. Moreover, Zhao Zilong believed that later in the battle, this army of the Tianyuan dynasty would choose to surrender. After all, if they did not surrender, what awaited them was death. Thank you, General. After hearing Zhao Zilong's words, this general of the Tianyuan dynasty looked at Zhao Zilong with gratitude, and then quickly transformed into a black streak of light and appeared on the battlefield. He then directly stopped the Tianyuan dynasty army, which had intended to continue resisting the Great Xia dynasty army. Under the restraint of their own general, the Tianyuan dynasty army quickly withdrew from the Great Xia dynasty army. However, expressions of relief could be seen on the faces of the surviving soldiers. They were thankful to have made it out alive from such a battlefield. From today onward, all soldiers shall surrender to this general. Any who dare disobey this general's orders shall be executed without mercy. Following this general of the Tianyuan dynasty issued his final command to the familiar army before him. However, a look of relief could be seen on his face at this moment. Although he had led this great battle, the number of Tianyuan dynasty soldiers who survived the conflict still reached over 800,000. This meant that in just a short period of time, over 100,000 Tianyuan dynasty soldiers had been slaughtered. After this general of the Tianyuan dynasty issued his final command, he slowly turned his gaze toward Zhao Zilong, waiting for Zhao Zilong's orders. Integrate them all. Those who resist shall be executed without mercy. After seeing the expression on the face of this general of the Tianyuan dynasty, Zhao Zilong understood his intention and then waved his hand toward the Great Xia dynasty army. The Great Xia dynasty army began to mobilize after witnessing this scene, even though this army had already surrendered to them. However, the Great Xia dynasty army planned to break them up, with each unit leading a portion of the surrendered troops, thereby integrating them into the Great Xia dynasty army. After seeing this scene, this general of the Tianyuan dynasty cupped his hands toward Zhao Zilong in satisfaction. Then, he was seen bowing toward the direction of the imperial capital of the Tianyuan dynasty. Having completed all this, the general of the Tianyuan dynasty struck his own chest with a palm. As he struck his chest with that palm, the chi on the body of this general of the Tianyuan dynasty began to slowly weaken. Finally, his life force was directly extinguished. However, even as he fell, the gaze of this general of the Tianyuan dynasty remained fixed on the direction of the imperial capital of the Tianyuan dynasty. Although Zhao Zilong had seen this scene early on, it could even be said that he could have prevented it all. But he did not choose to intervene, as this was the belief of this general of the Tianyuan dynasty. As a general on the battlefield, Zhao Zilong naturally would not cruelly let such a general of conviction continue to live. Subsequently, Zhao Zilong ordered several soldiers to give this general of the Tianyuan dynasty a proper burial. Chapter 376: The Emperor Approaches the City. Internal strife in the capital of the Tianyuan dynasty. Soon, Zhao Zilong led his army and completely absorbed the remaining Tianyuan dynasty forces. Having completed this, Zhao Zilong did not linger and immediately headed towards the imperial capital of the Tianyuan dynasty. Meanwhile, the imperial capital of the Tianyuan dynasty was still unaware that Zhao Zilong had so easily defeated their million-strong army. They were still fantasizing that their million-strong army could defeat Zhao Zilong's army, never realizing that the power of the force led by Zhao Zilong far surpassed their wildest imagination. As Zhao Zilong led his army rapidly through the Tianyuan dynasty, in just 2 days, the army he commanded had already arrived 100 miles outside the imperial capital of the Tianyuan dynasty. In just 2 days, he had subdued all the other cities of the Tianyuan dynasty. Now, only the imperial capital of the Tianyuan dynasty remained. The moment Zhao Zilong led his army to appear outside the imperial capital of the Tianyuan dynasty, the entire imperial dynasty instantly erupted in chaos. Even the emperor of Tianyuan dynasty wore a look of disbelief after hearing this news. He had not expected Zhao Zilong to reach their imperial capital of the Tianyuan dynasty so quickly. Originally, he had believed his million-strong army could deal with this force, or at the very least, impede their advance if they couldn't defeat them. But what he hadn't expected was that this army would appear outside the imperial capital of the Tianyuan dynasty with such astonishing speed. At this moment, the cultivators inside the imperial capital of the Tianyuan dynasty were even more shocked. Even the soldiers watching the external army had disbelief in their eyes. As for Zhao Zilong, who had arrived outside the imperial capital of the Tianyuan dynasty, he immediately ordered his army to set up camp and rest. After all, this was the last city of the Tianyuan dynasty. Once they captured the imperial capital of the Tianyuan dynasty, they would secure victory in this great war. Moreover, since the sky was about to darken, Zhao Zilong decided to launch the final attack on the imperial capital of the Tianyuan dynasty the following day. However, his action caused even greater fear throughout the imperial capital of the Tianyuan dynasty. After all, with the army led by Zhao Zilong eyeing them menacingly from below, who wouldn't fear such a force? After all, this army had swept through the entire Tianyuan dynasty, completely ending the war within the Tianyuan dynasty in less than a week. Now, they had even reached their imperial capital of the Tianyuan dynasty. It could be said that all the cultivators and common people inside the imperial capital of the Tianyuan dynasty were now in a state of panic. Even the ministers of the Tianyuan dynasty were extremely worried at this time. So many officials who had reached the king realm or above rushed into the imperial palace of the Tianyuan dynasty. At this moment, besides pleading for the protection of the Tianyuan dynasty's imperial family, they seemed to have no other recourse. Of course, there was a more direct method, surrendering to the army outside. However, due to the extremely rapid speed of the army led by Zhao Zilong, they did not know any information about the army led by Zhao Zilong. This was also the reason why the ministers of the Tianyuan dynasty had not chosen to surrender. After all, they did not know how the army led by Zhao Zilong treated captives. Furthermore, given the strength of the army led by Zhao Zilong, they did not need their surrender to capture the imperial capital of the Tianyuan dynasty. Just as the ministers rushed into the imperial palace, the emperor of Tianyuan dynasty, wearing an expression of disbelief, slowly sat upon the dragon throne in the main hall. Looking at the main hall before him, his eyes held a hint of daze. He was once the high-spirited emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty, but now he was about to become a slave of a fallen state. It could be said that the Tianyuan dynasty would ultimately fall during his generation. Now he was contemplating how he could still be worthy of the Tianyuan dynasty. Just as the emperor of Tianyuan dynasty was constantly thinking about the fate of the Tianyuan dynasty, the ministers of the Tianyuan dynasty also arrived at the imperial palace one after another, all wearing expressions of anxiety and fear. When they saw the dazed look on their majesty's face, they realized that their majesty seemed to have run out of options. Thus, the ministers of the Tianyuan dynasty who had held expectations slowly began to let go of their hopes. Some generals now wore expressions of facing death without regret. If their majesty had no solution, then they would die for the country this time. This was the highest honor for every general. However, the civil officials did not think this way. After all, if they could live, why would they choose to die? Therefore, many ministers were staring at their majesty. Their gazes were filled with anticipation. Since everyone is here, let's think about the countermeasure now. The emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty naturally saw the expressions of the assembled ministers below, so he waved his hand dismissively. In any case, whatever these ministers thought was no longer of great importance to him. It could even be said that tomorrow their Tianyuan dynasty might completely disappear into the river of history. Your Majesty, your servant believes we should resist to the death. Your servant refuses to believe the army outside is that powerful. Just after the emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty finished speaking, a powerful and resounding voice slowly emerged. Following this, a middle-aged general wearing silver-white battle armor slowly stepped forward, his face showing determination. Your Majesty, your servant also believes we should defend the imperial city to the death. Your servant likewise believes we should defend the imperial city to the death. Following the general's words, the other military officials also stepped forward one after another, kneeling and bowing to the emperor of Tianyuan dynasty. It could be seen that the faces of these generals were filled with determination. Clearly, they were resolved to fight this battle to the death. The emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty, whose face was originally dazed, finally revealed a smile after hearing the general's words. Although he might become the eternal sinner of the Tianyuan dynasty, there were still people following him until the end. Moreover, those following him were the military officials of the Tianyuan dynasty. Usually, many people claimed that military officials lacked intelligence. But when it truly came to a moment of life and death, only these military officials would live and die with the fate of the nation. Your Majesty, this must not be done. If we fight this external army to the bitter end now, I fear we have no chance of victory. Just as the emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty was about to make a decision, an aged old man slowly stepped forward to object, a trace of unwillingness on his face. Chapter 377 Internal Discussions within the Tianyuan dynasty. Two divergent voices. The emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty, who was about to issue an order, frowned after hearing the old minister's words. He then stopped his movement to issue the order and slowly turned his head to look at the old minister. Then, what does the prime minister think the Tianyuan dynasty should do to deal with this army outside? Should we just surrender the imperial capital? The emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty questioned the old minister in front of him, but it was clear that his words carried a hint of anger. If it weren't for the fact that this old minister was the prime minister of the Tianyuan dynasty, he would probably have been dragged out and executed by the emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty by now. After all, speaking such words at this moment would undermine morale. If they wanted to fight to the death, the old minister's words alone could lead to the extermination of his entire clan. But this was the prime minister of the Tianyuan dynasty, which was why the emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty questioned him. After all, the prime minister of the Tianyuan dynasty was second only to him in the entire Tianyuan dynasty. The other civil officials, upon hearing the emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty's words, all lowered their heads. They naturally knew that their Majesty was angry. However, the target of their Majesty's anger was their Prime Minister. If it had been them who spoke up, they would probably have been dragged out and executed. The strength of this army outside far exceeds our imagination, Your Majesty. The million-strong army you sent out last time couldn't even stop their advance. So who do you intend to send to stop them this time? Although there are still hundreds of thousands of soldiers in the imperial capital, does Your Majesty not know who is stronger or weaker compared to the former million-strong army? At this moment, the Prime Minister of the Tianyuan dynasty analyzed the situation with great helplessness. But when he looked at His Your Majesty, his eyes held a hint of disappointment. Although His Your Majesty's idea of wanting to live and die with the imperial dynasty, even in a crisis threatening its survival, was noble. If the enemy they faced this time was too powerful, their desire to live and die with the imperial dynasty would merely be a joke. Would such an outcome be what they wished to see? This was why the Prime Minister of the Tianyuan dynasty stepped forward to refute the idea of the Tianyuan dynasty's generals wanting to live and die with the imperial dynasty. After all, even if they were to fight this army outside now, it would only lead to meaningless sacrifices. Then, what does the Prime Minister mean? The Emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty was not foolish. After hearing the Prime Minister's explanation, he understood his meaning. After all, if they were to truly fight this army outside now, their fate would probably be no different from that of the million-strong army sent out last time. Although their imperial dynasty still had hundreds of thousands of soldiers, these hundreds of thousands of soldiers were still weaker than the million-strong army from last time. And if the million-strong army couldn't stop this army, how could their current hundreds of thousands of soldiers stop it? Thinking of this, the Emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty rubbed his forehead, feeling a great headache. He didn't know what to do now. To want to live and die with the imperial dynasty would be a meaningless sacrifice. But if they surrendered to this army outside, their Tianyuan dynasty would ultimately become the laughingstock of the entire northern region. After all, if they surrendered as soon as the enemy army reached the city gates, wouldn't that make the entire northern region laugh at them? Your Majesty, compared to the armies of the empire, which do you think is stronger or weaker? The Prime Minister of the Tianyuan dynasty did not state his own opinion. Instead, he raised his head again and asked the Emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty. His words also drew the attention of all the ministers present. At the same time, these ministers also began to ponder the strength of this army. However, they all unanimously agreed that this army far surpassed the strength of other imperial dynasty armies, and even the top armies within the empire could not compare to this army. This army should be comparable to the most elite armies within the empire. Although the Emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty did not know how powerful the armies within the empire were, he did not believe that the empire had such a powerful army. However, their Tianyuan dynasty was still a vassal state of the empire, so he naturally would not say anything that would tarnish the empire's reputation. Then, Your Majesty, do you think the power behind this army can compare to the empire? As the Emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty's words fell, the Prime Minister spoke another sentence that shocked all the ministers present, and they all looked at their Prime Minister with incredulous gazes. Because of the empire's power, they submitted to it, but as members of an imperial dynasty, they dared not speak ill of the empire. Otherwise, they would likely disappear completely from the northern region overnight. With such a powerful army, the force behind them naturally won't be too weak. The Emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty was also somewhat shocked upon hearing his Prime Minister's words, but at this moment, he also gave an ambiguous answer. However, in the heart of the Emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty, there were already conjectures and comparisons. A force that could so easily field such an army would naturally not be weaker than the empire. I heard that the 6 great dynasties of the entire northern region are simultaneously being attacked by a mysterious army. I imagine their situation is probably similar to ours, Your Majesty. Do you think there's a connection between these mysterious armies? And when the Prime Minister heard His Your Majesty's words, a meaningful smile appeared on his face, and then he slowly spoke another piece of news that shocked all the ministers present. Upon hearing this news, these ministers all looked at their Prime Minister in disbelief. They had not heard this news, yet their Prime Minister had, which naturally made them feel incredible. In fact, this was also because they had focused all their attention on this one army. Otherwise, they would have naturally heard the news from the outside world. Prime Minister, do you mean that the 6 great dynasties of our northern region are being attacked by the same force? The Emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty was also somewhat shocked upon hearing the Prime Minister's words, but soon he slowly turned his gaze to the Prime Minister of the Tianyuan dynasty's face and said. At this moment, he wanted to discern something from the Prime Minister of the Tianyuan dynasty's face, but unfortunately, the Prime Minister of the Tianyuan dynasty showed no expression. He looked completely calm, as if external matters had nothing to do with him. Chapter 378, The Tianyuan Dynasty's Final Decision. Zhao Zilong's Unexpected Turn of Events. Meanwhile, the other ministers also looked towards the Prime Minister. At this moment, they had vaguely guessed something from what the Prime Minister had just said, and they also looked forward to what he would say next. I believe these 6 armies were sent by a single force. Otherwise, such a coincidence would be impossible. And if these 6 armies were sent by a single force, then it means this force is confident in dealing with our 6 great dynasties, and can even be said to be confident in facing the 2 great empires. So, Your Majesty, do you think we can still resist their attack? The Prime Minister of the Tianyuan dynasty did not waste any more words. He slowly looked towards his emperor and spoke. At this point, he also began to anticipate how powerful the force behind this army truly was. His previous guess was only a conservative one. In fact, the Prime Minister of the Tianyuan dynasty's true guess was that this army wanted to conquer their entire northern region. To conquer their entire northern region, they would need to deal with the 3 dominant forces of the northern region: the Xiaoyao Empire, the Shuanghua Empire which they were affiliated with, and a legendary Overlord Blade sect. Now, this force has directly attacked their 6 great dynasties, which means this force has directly offended the 2 great empires. Does this not imply that the strength of this force can already contend with the 2 great empires? Otherwise, this force should have first dealt with the 3 great dynasties within one of the empires, in which case the other empire would not intervene. After all, if this force truly started a war with their empire first, the Xiaoyao Empire would definitely stand by or even reap the benefits. But now, this force has chosen to go to war with both empires simultaneously. Such strength has far exceeded their imagination. It can be said that the Prime Minister of the Tianyuan dynasty guessed that the strength of this force has far exceeded their imagination. So, Prime Minister, you mean for our Tianyuan dynasty to surrender to this army, or to the force behind this army? The Emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty now understood his Prime Minister's meaning. He looked at his Prime Minister with a hint of helplessness and spoke. However, at this moment, besides the helplessness, a hint of brilliance appeared on his face. Initially, he thought the entire Tianyuan dynasty had come to its end, but now it seemed like things might take a turn for the better. If the force behind this army was truly that powerful, then their surrender to this army would be more advantageous than being affiliated with an empire. Meanwhile, the other ministers also began to ponder the reliability of this matter. However, after a moment of thought, they also felt that this matter was indeed quite reliable. After all, if this force was truly more powerful than an empire, then the rewards they would receive in the future by joining this force would certainly be greater than those received by joining an empire. Exactly. We only have this one choice now. As for the other choice, it's like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. After hearing His Majesty's words, the Prime Minister of the Tianyuan dynasty nodded directly, acknowledging his thoughts. After speaking, his gaze slowly fixed on His Majesty's face. At this moment, he also wanted to know whether His Majesty intended to surrender or not. As for the others, they also began to look towards the Emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty. They too wanted to see if their Emperor intended to surrender or fight to the death. Even the generals present were waiting for the final order from their Emperor. If their Emperor ordered them to fight to the death, these generals would not hesitate in the slightest. But if their Emperor ordered them to surrender, they could only obey His Majesty's command. If that's the case, then open the city and surrender tomorrow. The Emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty naturally saw all the ministers present looking at him. After pondering for a moment, he spoke to the ministers with a sigh of helplessness. After speaking, the Emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty seemed to lose all vitality, slumping onto the imperial throne. Although this decision might bring great benefits to their Tianyuan dynasty, it was likely that the Tianyuan dynasty's existence in the long river of history would only be until today. In other words, from now on, the Tianyuan dynasty would cease to exist. Tomorrow morning, all ministers and I will go to the city gate to meet this army. Then he slowly raised his weary face and spoke to the ministers present. After speaking, he slowly turned and left. After all, even though he intended to surrender to this army now, he still had to inform his old ancestor. However, the Emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty believed he could persuade his old ancestor. And indeed, just as he thought, the Emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty only took a moment to persuade his old ancestor. Time passed slowly, and in a blink of an eye, the morning sun shone on the city wall. This ray of sunshine appeared before everyone as if breaking the darkness of the world. At this moment, Zhao Zilong, leading the army, was slowly approaching the imperial capital of the Tianyuan dynasty. At this time, his face showed no expression, as if the imperial capital of the Tianyuan dynasty posed no difficulty for him at all. Of course, if Zhao Zilong were to act, the imperial capital of the Tianyuan dynasty would indeed pose no difficulty for him. After all, it is quite easy for a Saint King level expert to deal with an imperial dynasty. Soon, the army led by Zhao Zilong had arrived outside the city gate of the imperial capital of the Tianyuan dynasty. However, as soon as he arrived outside the city gate of the imperial capital of the Tianyuan dynasty, Zhao Zilong's face showed a hint of surprise. The city gate of the imperial capital of the Tianyuan dynasty was wide open, and at this moment, the emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty was leading a group of ministers from the Tianyuan dynasty, standing at the city gate. Upon seeing Zhao Zilong arrive, their eyes were filled with scrutiny as they stared at Zilong. However, just one glance from Zhao Zilong made them feel an extremely terrifying qi, causing them to instantly lower their heads. At this moment, they finally understood why Zhao Zilong could so easily lead this army to conquer all the cities of their Tianyuan dynasty. After seeing this scene, Zhao Zilong also understood the Tianyuan dynasty's plan, so he waved his hand at the Saint King level vice general beside him. Upon seeing Zhao Zilong's gesture, the Saint King level vice general slowly rode his warhorse towards the emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty. As a Saint King level expert, he naturally would not fear anyone ambushing him. Chapter 379, The Surrender of the Tianyuan Dynasty, the Battle of the Capital of the 100 Battle Dynasty. What's more, the Saint King realm aura on him was directly released. Therefore, the emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty and a group of ministers also sensed his cultivation. At this moment, the emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty and the ministers stared with incredible eyes at the deputy general walking towards them. They had not expected that a mere deputy general's cultivation had reached the Saint King realm. So, what level had the cultivation of the true general of this army reached? Thinking of this, the emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty and the ministers all looked toward Zhao Zilong. As they looked at Zhao Zilong, the emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty and the ministers' eyes were filled with disbelief. At the same time, they secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Initially, they had thought of resisting this army, but now it seemed that if they did not surrender, they might not even know how they died. After all, even a random deputy general of this army had reached the Saint King realm. Then, wouldn't it be incredibly easy to deal with their Tianyuan dynasty? Subsequently, the emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty, realizing the situation, immediately handed over his imperial dynasty's imperial seal. At this moment, he respectfully looked at the deputy general in front of him. Although the person in front of him was only a deputy general of this army, his Saint King level cultivation was enough to command their respect. I, emperor of Tianyuan dynasty, along with the Tianyuan dynasty, surrender to this general. At the same time, he spoke very earnestly to the deputy general in front of him. After speaking, he led the ministers behind him in a respectful bow to the deputy general. After taking the imperial seal, the deputy general slowly walked towards Zhao Zilong. Soon, he handed the imperial seal to Zhao Zilong. Zhao Zilong merely glanced at it before directly throwing it into a storage ring. After all, this item was not of much use to them. The true goal of their great Xia dynasty was to unify the entire northern region. So, for now, it was enough that the Tianyuan dynasty surrendered to them. Since you intend to surrender to us, then from now on, the Tianyuan dynasty will be a vassal state of my great Xia dynasty. You may govern the Tianyuan dynasty, but you must obey the commands of my great Xia dynasty. Otherwise, the next time this general appears in the Tianyuan dynasty, it will be to annihilate the nation directly. Zhao Zilong also slowly spoke to the emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty at this moment, but there was also a terrifying killing intent about him. At the very beginning of this great war, Chen Jibao and the others had already issued an order. As long as these major imperial dynasties surrendered, they could be accepted. However, these major imperial dynasties had to obey the commands of their great Xia dynasty. If they did not obey the commands of their great Xia dynasty, then how could they be considered vassal states of their great Xia dynasty? We respectfully obey this general's command. After hearing Zhao Zilong's words, the emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty also saluted Zhao Zilong very earnestly and respectfully. After knowing the strength of Zhao Zilong and this deputy general, he had no other thoughts. After all, a few generals from their side could destroy their Tianyuan dynasty, so how could their Tianyuan dynasty dare to feign compliance? And with the emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty surrendering along with his ministers, the entire Tianyuan dynasty completely surrendered to the great Xia dynasty. At the same time, the great Xia dynasty once again expanded its territory by an imperial dynasty. Although the Tianyuan dynasty was not a dominant force in the northern region, its territory was larger than any former imperial dynasty in the eastern region. It was only natural for others to call the eastern region barren land. After all, the entire eastern region's territory combined was less than 1/10 of the northern regions. And just as Zhao Zilong brought the Tianyuan dynasty into the great Xia dynasty, Lu Bu, on his side, had also led his army to the imperial capital of the 100 Battles dynasty. Lu Bu was inherently a brute, So his method of warfare was different from Zhao Zilong's. He chose to push through directly, so any army that stood in his way was slaughtered by him. Of course, no matter how cruel Lu Bu was, he still took many captives, so Lu Bu's army had now reached 1,000,000 strong. And now he had directly advanced to the final imperial capital of the 100 Battles dynasty. It's a pity that Zilong's route is much shorter than mine. Otherwise, this time I would definitely be the first to capture an imperial dynasty. Looking at the imperial capital of the 100 Battles dynasty in front of him, a hint of helplessness appeared on Lu Bu's face. If it weren't for the several days he spent on the road, then he believed he would definitely be the first to conquer an imperial dynasty. But being the second to conquer an imperial dynasty was also not bad. Perhaps because Zhao Zilong and Lu Bu had never fought each other in the Three Kingdoms world. In this world, Lu Bu and Zhao Zilong always regarded each other as rivals. Whether in terms of strength or command ability, the two constantly competed. This was also why the two had broken through to the late Saint King so quickly. Of course, in this world, the top generals summoned by Chu Fan were not just the two of them. For example, Pei Yuanqing, Yuan Qingdu, and others were also strong. It could be said that they were now referred to by Chu Fan as the 8 great generals of the Great Xia dynasty. These 8 generals were White Horse General Zhao Zilong, Demon God General Lu Bu, Silver Hammer General Pei Yuanqing, Golden General Yuan Qingdu, Spear King Jiang Song, Silver Armor General Luo Chung, Iron Hammer General Li Yuanba, and Overlord Xiang Yu. These 8 were the 8 great generals of the Great Xia dynasty. As for the others, they were not in this rank. After all, there was a gap between the others and them. Of course, the strength of Dian Wei, Su Chu, and others was not too different from theirs, but they were not destined to be among the 8 great generals. And the strength of the 8 great generals of the Great Xia dynasty was formidable. Each of them had already broken through to the Saint King realm, and among them, Li Yuanba and Xiang Yu had even reached the Saint King consummation realm. They were only one step away from the Great Saint realm. Returning to Lu Bu's side, Lu Bu at this moment had no intention of setting up camp. Instead, he planned to directly lead his army to breach the imperial capital of the 100 Battles dynasty in front of him. Although the imperial capital of the 100 Battles dynasty was in a state of panic at this time, they still adopted a defensive posture. After all, no matter what, their 100 Battles dynasty was an imperial dynasty built through sheer strength. So how could they surrender so easily to the army outside now? Upon sensing the 100 Battles dynasty's determination, Lu Bu's lips curled slightly. Then he directly waved his hand, ordering the army behind him to attack the imperial capital of the 100 Battles dynasty. Chapter 380. The Great Battle between Lu Bu and the Emperor of the 100 Battles dynasty, and the Emperor's request. Lu Bu leisurely rode his red hare horse, looking at the imperial capital of the 100 Battles dynasty before him. Standing above the imperial capital of the 100 Battles dynasty at this moment was a middle-aged man clad in white battle armor and holding a long spear. The middle-aged man's face held a look of determination, and his gaze drifted down toward Lu Bu. It was unknown what he was thinking at the moment. However, it was evident that a hint of solemnity marked his face. As for the army Lu Bu brought, they were charging directly toward the imperial capital. The aura belonging to those above the Grotto Heaven realm burst forth from them. Simultaneously, led by several saint-level experts, they charged straight toward the imperial capital of the 100 Battles dynasty. What a terrifying army! Even an empire might not possess forces this powerful. When the middle-aged man on the city wall saw this scene, a trace of worry appeared in his eyes, and seeing the aura emanating from the troops below made him feel incredibly unsettled. He had not expected the strength of the army he encountered this time to be so immense. The strength of every single person had reached above the Grotto Heaven realm. One must know that the Grotto Heaven realm was enough to serve as a general in their 100 Battles dynasty. Yet, in this army, the Grotto Heaven realm only qualified one as a soldier. Such military strength had far exceeded the capacity of their 100 Battles dynasty. However, the Emperor of the 100 Battles dynasty had no intention of surrendering now. After all, the motto of their 100 Battles dynasty was that they either subdued others or others subdued them. Otherwise, the concept of surrender did not exist in their hearts. Even the former empire had to subdue them before they agreed to become a vassal state. Furthermore, the 100 Battles dynasty used to be the most stubborn imperial dynasty among the empires. Even facing the encroachment of a 1,000,000-strong army from the empire, they chose to fight. It was precisely because of this that the 100 Battles dynasty lost many experts in that battle. Otherwise, although the 100 Battles dynasty could not compare to the empire, its strength definitely far surpassed that of any of the other 5 great imperial dynasties. Your Majesty, judging by the attack speed of the army outside, I fear we won't last much longer. Standing beside the middle-aged man was a middle-aged general, who spoke with deep worry in his eyes as he looked at Your Majesty. Although their 100 Battles dynasty believed in war, the strength of the army outside was simply too formidable. Therefore, no matter how much they resisted, it would be difficult to withstand the army's assault. It could even be said that it wouldn't be long before their 100 Battles dynasty was breached by this army. Moreover, the strength of the army outside had already earned their respect. No matter what, my 100 Battles dynasty will fight this army outside to the very end. After all, which great battle involving my 100 Battles dynasty has not been a matter of life and death? After hearing the general's words, the Emperor of the 100 Battles dynasty looked at the army attacking the city below with a determined expression and spoke slowly. Although he knew the 100 Battles dynasty was nothing in the face of this army, as the Emperor of the 100 Battles dynasty, how could he surrender so easily? Immediately afterward, the Emperor of the 100 Battles dynasty joined the battle, holding his long spear. The aura belonging to the entering saint realm completely erupted from him, and this aura instantly filled the breaches that had already appeared on the city wall. Seeing this scene from afar, Lu Bu revealed his 2 rows of clean, white teeth in a smile. He then rode the red hair toward the Emperor of the 100 Battles dynasty. His heavenly halberd radiated terrifying pressure, but Lu Bu intentionally suppressed his cultivation to the entering saint realm. After all, having finally found someone so entertaining, how could he instantly slay the Emperor of the 100 Battles dynasty? Upon sensing the battle intent emanating from Lu Bu, the Emperor of the 100 Battles dynasty looked at Lu Bu with equal battle intent, while the long spear in his hand continuously emitted terrifying rays of light. Lu Bu laughed unrestrainedly, and at the same time, his heavenly halberd struck directly toward the Emperor of the 100 Battles dynasty. Seeing this, the Emperor of the 100 Battles dynasty immediately used the long spear in his hand to block the attack. But how could Lu Bu's attack be so simple? The instant the spear and the heavenly halberd collided, a terrifying force was transmitted directly from the heavenly halberd into the body of the Emperor of the 100 Battles dynasty. Feeling this terrifying power, the Emperor of the 100 Battles dynasty revealed a look of shock. However, he quickly stabilized himself and used the ground beneath his feet to dissipate the force. Nevertheless, it was visible that the previous exchange had caused a trace of blood to appear at the corner of the Emperor of the 100 Battles dynasty's mouth. Yet, the power within his body had not diminished, and the battle intent radiating from him grew even stronger. Interesting. Aside from the generals of my great Xia dynasty, you are the only one at the same realm who has taken one of my moves without being severely injured. Lu Bu looked at the Emperor of the 100 Battles dynasty before him with a satisfied smile, but after saying this, he continued to charge toward the Emperor of the 100 Battles dynasty, heavenly halberd in hand. At this moment, the Emperor of the 100 Battles dynasty radiated an even more terrifying battle intent, and the long spear in his hand transformed into streaks resembling venomous snakes, striking toward Lu Bu. The two immediately engaged in fierce combat, but no matter what, Lu Bu was still the god of war from the Three Kingdoms era. Therefore, the power carried by his every move had far exceeded the limits of the Imperial Dynasty Emperor's imagination. After only 3 moves, the Emperor of the 100 Battles dynasty began to fall into a disadvantage, yet he continued to use the spear in his hand to block Lu Bu's attacks. After a long while, the Emperor of the 100 Battles dynasty could no longer hold on. The long spear in his hand was directly knocked away by the heavenly halberd in Lu Bu's hand. At the same time, he could no longer suppress it and spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. His body also began to tremble. Although Lu Bu was slightly disappointed upon seeing this, he stopped his movements. He then calmly looked at the Emperor of the 100 Battles dynasty standing before him. The general's strength is formidable. I wonder if I might serve as a vanguard under the general's command. However, the words spoken by the Emperor of the 100 Battles dynasty at this moment stunned everyone present. Even Lu Bu, upon hearing this, was slightly surprised. He hadn't expected the Emperor of the 100 Battles dynasty before him to neither beg for mercy nor choose to continue fighting. Instead, he chose to ask to serve as a vanguard under his banner. Chapter 381 The Eccentric Emperor of the 100 Battle Dynasty. Imperial support is imminent. The others from the 100 Battles dynasty looked helplessly at their Your Majesty. They hadn't expected their Your Majesty to choose to be a vanguard under another general's command. Had he grown tired of being the Emperor of an Imperial dynasty? Do you know this general's true cultivation? After hearing the Emperor of the 100 Battles dynasty's words, Lu Bu directly released the Saint King realm aura from his body, while looking sharply at the Emperor of the 100 Battles dynasty. Current Grand Pioneer under Lu Bu is willing to serve this general. Upon hearing Lu Bu's words, the excitement in the eyes of the Emperor of the 100 Battles dynasty intensified. After sensing the aura emanating from Lu Bu, he could no longer suppress the excitement in his eyes. It was as if he had seen an unparalleled beauty. Since you wish to be a vanguard under this general, then this general's first command is for them to open the city gates and surrender. Lu Bu hadn't expected current Grand Pioneer under Lu Bu, who was before him, to be such a person. So, he slowly spoke to current Grand Pioneer under Lu Bu. After speaking, Lu Bu calmly stood in place, holding his heavenly halberd. Although it would be easy for Lu Bu to conquer the imperial capital of the 100 Battles dynasty, since current Grand Pioneer under Lu Bu, who was before him, wished to surrender to him. Then let current Grand Pioneer under Lu Bu conquer this city first. And the army Lu Bu brought, upon hearing Lu Bu's words, also stopped their actions and watched current Grand Pioneer under Lu Bu with lingering gazes. From today onwards, I am no longer your emperor. I am the vanguard general under this general. But now, I will issue my last command to you. Open the gates and surrender to this grand vanguard. Current Grand Pioneer under Lu Bu, upon hearing Lu Bu's words, stepped forward excitedly and spoke to the people on the city wall. At this moment, he quickly embraced his new role. Now, he was like a grand vanguard under Lu Bu's command, not the emperor of the 100 Battles dynasty. The generals and saint entry-level experts within the imperial capital of the 100 Battles dynasty were extremely depressed upon hearing their Majesty's words. However, no matter how depressed they were at this moment, they could not disobey their Your Majesty's words. Furthermore, the Saint King level aura Lu Bu had just displayed also made them feel incredible, and they knew that they could not resist Lu Bu's attack no matter what. So, what difference would surrendering now make? Thus, several soldiers slowly opened the city gates. Of course, these soldiers only opened the city gates at the signal of the generals of the 100 Battles dynasty. Moreover, since their Majesty had already surrendered, what was the point of them defending the 100 Battles dynasty? Lu Bu also hadn't expected to conquer the 100 Battles dynasty so easily this time. So he slowly approached current Grand Pioneer under Lu Bu and patted his shoulder. You, young man, have a lot of potential. However, your cultivation is a bit weak after following this general. In the future, you must improve your cultivation more. After all, even this general is just a vanguard general of the Great Xia dynasty. However, within this general's army, the vanguard position is yours. After saying this, Lu Bu still showed some appreciation for current Grand Pioneer under Lu Bu before him. Although current Grand Pioneer under Lu Bu's strength was only at the initial Saint realm, the fact that he could exchange so many blows with him, who was also at the initial Saint realm, showed just how strong current Grand Pioneer under Lu Bu truly was. Moreover, if he were to be trained by him in the future, current Grand Pioneer under Lu Bu's strength would definitely greatly improve. At that time, his Lu Bu's faction would also have a Grand Vanguard. Thank you, General. From now on, I, current Grand Pioneer under Lu Bu, will be the first Grand Vanguard under your command. Upon hearing Lu Bu's words, current Grand Pioneer under Lu Bu's face also showed a hint of excitement. Although Lu Bu, who was before him, was also a vanguard of the Great Xia dynasty. He, current Grand Pioneer under Lu Bu, greatly admired Lu Bu, so no matter what position Lu Bu held, he would follow Lu Bu. This was the belief they held in the 100 Battles dynasty. And as current Grand Pioneer under Lu Bu surrendered to Lu Bu and became Lu Bu's vanguard officer, the entire 100 Battles dynasty completely fell. The Great Xia dynasty also conquered 2 imperial dynasties in the northern region. And just as Lu Bu had just conquered the 100 Battles dynasty, the other 4 armies also began to exert their strength. On Pei Yuanqing's side, Pei Yuanqing, wielding a pair of silver hammers, continuously attacked cities and seized territory. He quickly defeated his opponents and, leading his army at an extremely fast pace, soon conquered an imperial dynasty. Moreover, after conquering this imperial dynasty, Pei Yuanqing still wanted to continue attacking the empire. However, due to the orders of several Grand Marshals, he would consolidate this imperial dynasty and then wait for orders in the imperial capital of the imperial dynasty. And the other 3 routes also conquered imperial dynasties at an extremely fast pace. And after conquering the imperial dynasties, they were all waiting for the orders of their respective Grand Marshals. Within a few consecutive days, the 6 great dynasties of the northern region completely fell, and these 6 great dynasties successfully surrendered to the Great Xia dynasty. However, one of the imperial dynasties refused to surrender, so all members of that imperial dynasty's royal family were annihilated by the Great Xia dynasty's army. And the other 3 imperial dynasties, besides Zhao, Zilong, and Lu Bu's side, seeing the terrifying strength of the Great Xia dynasty, also surrendered to the Great Xia dynasty. Just as the Great Xia dynasty conquered the 6 great dynasties, the empire's reinforcements also arrived outside the imperial dynasty. However, They would never have dreamed that the 6 great dynasties they had hoped for would be conquered so easily by the Great Xia dynasty. At this moment, outside the Tianyuan dynasty, an old ancestor of the Ouyang family at the late Saint King stage appeared here leading the Silver Armor Army. They looked travel-worn at this moment, and the face of this Saint King-level old ancestor of the Ouyang family was even filled with anger. However, when he saw that no major battle had occurred in the imperial capital of the Tianyuan dynasty, he also breathed a sigh of relief. After all, if the imperial capital of the Tianyuan dynasty had been seized by the enemy, he would probably have spent some time to resolve this battle. But now, it seemed no major battle had occurred in the imperial capital of the Tianyuan dynasty, which meant that this army had not yet reached the imperial capital of the Tianyuan dynasty. Thinking of this, the old ancestor of the Ouyang family looked at the imperial capital of the Tianyuan dynasty with a confident expression. However, when he saw the general in silver armor standing on the city wall of the imperial capital of the Tianyuan dynasty, a hint of doubt appeared on his face. It turned out that just as this old ancestor of the Ouyang family was about to lead his army to appear in the imperial capital of the Tianyuan dynasty, Zhao Zilong had sensed his presence. That was why he directly appeared on the city wall of the imperial capital of the Tianyuan dynasty. Moreover, the net of Luo and the embroidered uniform guard had already received news about this master of the empire from the Ouyang family, making a move. This was also why Zhao Zilong and the others remained in the 6 great dynasties after conquering them, waiting. Chapter 382 War Strikes Again. Zhao Zilong battles the patriarch of the Ouyang family. The old ancestor of the Ouyang family looked at the imperial capital of the Tianyuan dynasty with some impatience at this moment. Although he had never met the silver-armored general standing on the city wall, how could a mere imperial dynasty's general dare to disrespect their empire so much? What's more, the old ancestor of the Ouyang family was still angry about Ouyang Baishan's matter, so he was naturally very impatient at this moment. "Let your emperor come see me." His voice carried a hint of disdain and anger, and the contempt in his eyes was palpable to everyone present. "So you are the imperial old ancestor of the Shuanghua Empire?" After hearing his words, Zhao Zilong slowly turned his gaze to him, with a hint of disdain in his eyes. Although the old ancestor of the Ouyang family below had also reached the late Saint King stage. But compared to him, the strength of this old ancestor of the Ouyang family was far too inferior. Therefore, Zhao Zilong's gaze towards the old ancestor of the Ouyang family naturally carried contempt and disdain. "Did you not hear what I said? Let the emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty come out and see me." The old ancestor of the Ouyang family became even more furious after hearing Zhao Zilong's words, and with an angry and majestic look in his eyes, he spoke to Zhao Zilong. After speaking, the aura belonging to his Saint King realm instantly burst forth. A terrifying pressure instantly bore down on the imperial capital of the Tianyuan dynasty. However, this pressure was nothing in front of Zhao Zilong. He calmly glanced at the old ancestor of the Ouyang family. In an instant, that terrifying pressure vanished. It was replaced by an even more terrifying pressure, heading towards the old ancestor of the Ouyang family and the Silver Armor Army in front of him. A look of incredulity suddenly appeared in the originally arrogant eyes of the old ancestor of the Ouyang family. At this moment, no matter how foolish he was, he knew that the silver-armored general on the city wall of the Tianyuan imperial capital was not from the Tianyuan dynasty within their empire. After all, how could someone from the Tianyuan dynasty withstand the pressure of a late Saint King cultivator like him? "Are you the leader of the army that attacked the Tianyuan dynasty?" Then, the old ancestor of the Ouyang family looked at Zhao Zilong with anger in his eyes, and at the same time, he waved his hand, dispersing Zhao Zilong's pressure. At this moment, the old ancestor of the Ouyang family naturally also sensed Zhao Zilong's cultivation. Although he was somewhat shocked by Zhao Zilong's cultivation, this was their empire after all. Therefore, when facing Zhao Zilong, he naturally carried a hint of disdain. "You're not completely stupid, but today, no matter what, you must remain here." Zhao Zilong also showed a playful smile after hearing the old ancestor of the Ouyang family's words. Then he stood slowly on the city wall, holding his dragon gallbladder bright silver spear, looking down at the old ancestor of the Ouyang family from above. At the same time, the aura belonging to his Saint King realm completely erupted. At this moment, Zhao Zilong was like a god of war descended from the heavens. "Then we'll have to see if you have the qualifications. Everyone kill." The old ancestor of the Ouyang family also showed a look of anger on his face after hearing Zhao Zilong's words. Then, he sneered and spoke to Zhao Zilong. And after speaking, he did not forget to give orders to the Silver Armor Army behind him. And this Silver Armor Army, having received the order, directly attacked the imperial capital of the Tianyuan dynasty. As for the old ancestor of the Ouyang family, he quickly flew into the sky. After provoking Zhao Zilong, he vanished. Clearly, this old ancestor of the Ouyang family did not intend to fight Zhao Zilong here. After all, a Saint King level battle could easily destroy this place. Zhao Zilong naturally had no fear. He held his dragon gallbladder bright silver spear and instantly flew into the sky. And the army brought by Zhao Zilong also engaged in a fierce battle with the army in front of them. Although the army in front was an elite army of the empire, its strength was still slightly weaker than the army brought by Zhao Zilong. What's more, there was also a Saint King level martial general in the army brought by Zhao Zilong. The empire's army looked at the Saint King level expert on their opposite side with incredulity in their eyes. However, this Saint King level expert did not pay attention to these imperial armies. Instead, he directly looked towards the leaders among the Saint entry-level armies. Then, Zhao Zilong's vice commander directly took away all the Saint entry-level experts from this imperial army. Clearly, he also did not intend to fight these Saint entry-level experts from the imperial army here. In an instant, the strongest in the battlefield were merely the Saint entry-level experts from the army brought by Zhao Zilong. As for the strongest in the Silver Armor army in front, they were now merely true King Realm experts. The two armies quickly clashed. The moment they clashed, although the Great Xia Dynasty's army could not achieve an overwhelming victory as they did at the beginning, they found it quite easy when fighting the Silver Armor army in front of them. After all, the lowest cultivation in this Great Xia Dynasty's army was at the Grotto Heaven Realm, and while Grotto Heaven Realm cultivators were common in the Silver Armor army in front, most of the soldiers in the Silver Armor army were at the Divine Power Realm. As for the battle in the sky at this moment, it was extremely fierce. Zhao Zilong had never fought an enemy so fiercely after breaking through to the late Saint King stage, so he naturally had to unleash his true combat power now. He lightly thrust his long spear, and the next second, a golden phoenix appeared behind him. This golden phoenix directly charged towards the old ancestor of the Ouyang family. And the old ancestor of the Ouyang family, seeing this scene, quickly pulled out a long spear. Frost chi continuously emanated from the long spear, and these frosts seemed to freeze the entire world. And behind the old ancestor of the Ouyang family, a silver-white giant wolf appeared. This silver-white giant wolf directly charged towards Zhao Zilong's direction. Soon, the golden phoenix clashed with the silver-white giant wolf. The golden phoenix was like a phoenix made of pure gold. The moment it collided with the silver-white giant, its claws directly embedded into the body of the silver-white giant wolf. Instantly, the silver-white giant wolf in front of it disintegrated, and the golden phoenix, having accomplished all this, showed no signs of stopping, directly charging towards the old ancestor of the Ouyang family. The old ancestor of the Ouyang family, seeing this scene, also quickly condensed one layer of frost after another to block this golden phoenix in front of him. Chapter 383, Slaying the Ancestor of the Ouyang Family, the Fall of the Saint King, and the Appearance of Extraordinary Phenomena in Heaven and Earth. It wasn't until these frosts spread across the entire sky that they finally resisted Zhao Zilong's golden phoenix. However, even so, the old ancestor of the Ouyang family was sent flying several thousand meters away by this terrifying attack. At this moment, when he looked at Zhao Zilong, his eyes were filled with solemnity. Perhaps at first, he thought that Zhao Zilong's strength was not as powerful as he imagined, but now he no longer thought so. Because Zhao Zilong's strength was indeed terrifyingly strong. Just one move had reduced him to this state. Then the old ancestor of the Ouyang family's power instantly converged, and at the same time, a wolf howl sounded behind him. A terrifying, profound, ice-colored giant wolf slowly emerged behind him. The aura emanating from this profound, ice-colored giant wolf caused the surrounding space to freeze. At the same time, it was as if the law between heaven and earth also began to slowly gather around him. Of course, more importantly, the entire world at this moment seemed to be frozen. Even the capital, tens of thousands of miles away, felt this terrifying aura. At this moment, the emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty stood on the city wall, looking worriedly at the frozen area in the sky. Although he didn't know who would win or lose this great battle, the emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty hoped that the winner of this great battle would be Zhao Zilong. After all, their Tianyuan imperial dynasty had already surrendered to Zhao Zilong, so naturally, they couldn't watch Zhao Zilong fail. After all, if Zhao Zilong really lost, then their Tianyuan imperial dynasty would completely offend the empire, and their Tianyuan imperial dynasty would also be completely annihilated in the long river of history. After all, they were now tied to the same rope as Zhao Zilong. And it wasn't just the emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty who was worried. Even the ministers below were extremely anxious. General strength is so powerful. How could he possibly lose to this old ancestor of the Ouyang family from the empire? I believe the general will definitely win. The former prime minister of the Tianyuan Imperial Dynasty slowly stepped forward at this moment, staring confidently at the sky. He did not believe that Zhao Zilong would lose to this old ancestor of the Ouyang family. After all, the aura emanating from Zhao Zilong alone was not something ordinary people could compare to. What's more, Zhao Zilong was merely a general of the Great Xia Dynasty, while this old ancestor of the Ouyang family was the foundation of the empire. Thus, from this, one could see the gap between the empire and the Great Xia Dynasty. The other ministers and the emperor of the Tianyuan Dynasty also breathed a sigh of relief after hearing his words, and at this moment, they also understood this fact. So they all joined the battlefield. Instead of worrying about whether Zhao Zilong could defeat the old ancestor of the Ouyang family, it was better to join the battlefield and help Zhao Zilong's army deal with this silver armor army. And the facts were exactly as the prime minister of the Tianyuan Imperial Dynasty had imagined. At this moment, Zhao Zilong in the sky showed no ripples in his eyes when he saw this scene. Instead, he calmly stared at the old ancestor of the Ouyang family opposite him. Then, he gently brandished the dragon gallbladder bright silver spear in his hand. The next second, a dragon roar directly resounded through the sky. It was as if a true giant dragon was about to descend upon this world. And with this loud sound spreading throughout the world, a silver-white giant dragon appeared behind Zhao Zilong. The moment this silver-white giant dragon appeared, its eyes held a hint of confusion, as if it had just woken up. When it saw the profound, ice-colored giant wolf opposite it, a very human-like disdain appeared in its eyes. Then this silver-white giant dragon let out a roar towards the profound, ice-colored giant wolf in front of it. The roar shook heaven and earth. The surrounding profound ice was instantly shattered by this roar. At the same time, the giant wolf's body also began to tremble. Although the giant wolf had no life, the dragon clan was the most top-tier among all the Yao race. Therefore, their pressure naturally worked on this profound ice-colored giant wolf in front of them. And when the old ancestor of the Ouyang family saw this scene, an expression of disbelief appeared on his face. He hadn't expected that the lifeless giant wolf would actually fear this lifeless giant dragon in front of him. At the same time, the old ancestor of the Ouyang family's face also carried a hint of anger. At this moment, he was truly enraged by Zhao Zilong. But even if he was angry, he could only be angry for a moment. After all, Zhao Zilong's strength far exceeded his imagination. And just as the old ancestor of the Ouyang family looked at Zhao Zilong with anger, at this moment, Zhao Zilong unhurriedly brandished the long spear in his hand. Then the silver-white giant dragon behind him directly charged towards the old ancestor of the Ouyang family. At this moment, Zhao Zilong was like a character in a game, unleashing a powerful ultimate move, charging towards the old ancestor of the Ouyang family. The old ancestor of the Ouyang family naturally wouldn't be willing to let this terrifying attack land on him. He also quickly brandished the weapon in his hand. The next second, the profound ice-colored giant wolf behind him directly charged towards Zhao Zilong's direction. And after the silver-white giant dragon disdainfully glanced at the profound ice-colored giant wolf, it directly opened its blood-red mouth and completely devoured the profound ice-colored giant wolf. After doing all this, only a few silver-white strands of chi flowed from its nose. Otherwise, it had no effect on it whatsoever. When the old ancestor of the Ouyang family saw this scene, the look of disbelief in his eyes grew even more intense. At this moment, his entire being was stunned in midair. He hadn't expected Zhao Zilong's strength in front of him to be so terrifying. And at this moment, this silver-white giant dragon clearly did not choose to stop here. Instead, it directly charged towards the old ancestor of the Ouyang family. At this moment, even if the old ancestor of the Ouyang family reacted, there was no time. His entire body was instantly annihilated by this silver-white giant dragon. At the same time, streaks of blood chi scattered across the sky. The old ancestor of the Ouyang family's body instantly vanished into the sky, leaving only that blood mist in the air. However, just as this old ancestor of the Ouyang family fell, a terrifying blood-red natural phenomenon appeared above the entire Tianyuan Imperial Dynasty. Blood-red, fresh blood continuously scattered within this natural phenomenon. This caused the cultivation of all cultivators in the Tianyuan Imperial Dynasty to gradually increase. Among them, the cultivation of those weaker cultivators increased even more significantly. Even those dry deserts at this moment grew some faint green grass. However, for them to truly grow, it would indeed require countless ages. Of course, most importantly, all cultivators in the Tianyuan Imperial Dynasty at this moment looked towards this blood-red natural phenomenon in the sky. Chapter 384. Lu Bu's disdain for the Ouyang family patriarch and the adoration of Luoyang. the little fanboy. When a Saint King level expert falls, a celestial phenomenon will appear. Of course, the celestial phenomenon that appears is related to the location. For example, in the Eastern region, if a Saint King level expert falls, the entire Eastern region will not experience the celestial phenomenon of a Saint King level expert falling. However, in the Northern region, a place with more spiritual chi and territory than the Eastern region, the celestial phenomenon of a Saint King level expert falling is not as powerful. It can only cover one imperial dynasty. Of course, if a great saint level expert falls, it's not that simple. The celestial phenomenon of a great saint level expert falling can cover the entire Northern region. Of course, if it's in a top-tier place like the Central region, then the phenomenon of a Saint King level expert falling can be ignored. After all, under the heavenly Dao rules of the Central region, Saint King level experts are not very powerful. However, the phenomenon of a Saint King level expert falling in the entire Tianyuan dynasty naturally caused the cultivators of the Tianyuan dynasty to be astonished. It had been thousands, even nearly 10,000 years since they had witnessed the phenomenon of a Saint King level expert falling. What's going on? How could a Saint King level expert fall within our Tianyuan dynasty? Some time ago, our Tianyuan dynasty was just attacked by an army. Could this fall of a Saint King level expert be related to that army? It must be related to that army. If it weren't related to that army, how could a Saint King level expert fall in the Tianyuan dynasty? Now that the Tianyuan dynasty has completely surrendered to this army, it means that the current phenomenon of a Saint King level expert falling might be related to the great battle between this army and the empire. I hope this army achieves victory this time. Otherwise, our Tianyuan dynasty will face utter destruction. Yes, because the emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty had spread the news of his surrender to the great Xia dynasty. So now, the cultivators and common people within the Tianyuan dynasty all knew that their Tianyuan dynasty had surrendered to the army that attacked them some time ago. And this fall of a Saint King level expert also made them realize that this great battle was likely between this army and the Saint King level experts of the empire. As for which side Saint King had fallen, they did not know. But they were indeed hoping that the army currently governing their Tianyuan dynasty would emerge victorious. After all, they were not fools. They knew that if the empire won, their Tianyuan dynasty would suffer utter destruction, and they would naturally suffer along with it. At this moment, Zhao Zilong, who had just slain the old ancestor of the Ouyang family, slowly descended onto the city walls of the Tianyuan dynasty. At this time, he stood on the city wall, holding his dragon gallbladder bright silver spear, his eyes devoid of any ripples. And after seeing this scene, the emperor of the Tianyuan dynasty and his ministers showed expressions of excitement. They then began to slaughter the silver armor army in front of them with even greater vigor. Upon seeing Zhao Zilong appear, the silver armor army also knew that their old ancestor had fallen, so their combat strength began to greatly diminish. Just as Zhao Zilong dealt with the old ancestor of the Ouyang family, Lu Bu on the 100 Battles dynasty side also encountered the old ancestor of the Ouyang family leading the silver armor army. However, the cultivation of the old ancestor of the Ouyang family who appeared in the 100 Battles dynasty was only at the mid-stage Saint King, not even as high as the cultivation of the old ancestor of the Ouyang family who appeared in the Tianyuan dynasty. Nevertheless, this old ancestor of the Ouyang family was also looking arrogantly at the imperial capital of the 100 Battles dynasty. And at this moment, Luo Yang, the former emperor of the 100 Battles dynasty, now the current grand pioneer under Lu Bu, looked at this old ancestor of the Ouyang family with an excited expression. "Boss, let me try this person sent by the Ouyang family." Then, he turned his head, looking excited, and spoke to Lu Bu. At this moment, he was like a very warlike general. "This fellow's cultivation has already reached the mid-stage Saint King. You should look for other targets." Seeing Luo Yang, who was eager for battle, in front of him, Lu Bu also rubbed his forehead helplessly, but this was also why he thought so highly of Luo Yang. After all, he was naturally a warlike person. Then, Lu Bu also picked out a general from the Silver Armor Army, whose cultivation was equal to Luo Yang's. He then waved at Luo Yang. Seeing this, Luo Yang naturally looked towards the general in the Silver Armor Army. "I didn't expect your 100 Battles dynasty to surrender to others. Do you really think that by relying on him, you can preserve your 100 Battles dynasty?" At this time, the old ancestor of the Ouyang family was naturally very angry. He hadn't expected Luo Yang, the emperor of the 100 Battles dynasty, to surrender to others, and now he was even looking at him with such eyes. How could this not make the high and mighty old ancestor of the Ouyang family feel angry? "Old man, don't be so arrogant in front of this young master, or my boss will cut off your head and kick it like a ball." After hearing the words of the old ancestor of the Ouyang family, Luo Yang looked at the old ancestor of the Ouyang family with an annoying expression, as if he himself could slay the old ancestor of the Ouyang family. and the old ancestor of the Ouyang family became even more furious after hearing Luo Yang's words. If a gaze could kill a person, then his gaze would have killed Luo Yang 1,000 times over by now. May I ask, Your Excellency, what power you come from? Don't you know this is the territory of my Shuanghua Empire? The old ancestor of the Ouyang family suppressed the impulse in his heart and slowly looked towards Lu Bu's direction. At this moment, he didn't know how strong Lu Bu truly was, which was why he was probing the power behind Lu Bu. He also wanted to use the empire to threaten Lu Bu in front of him. The Shuanghua Empire is not worthy of competing with the power behind this general. If it weren't for the Marshal's own plans, this general would now directly wield my heavenly halberd and charge into the capital of your so-called empire. As a brute, how could Lu Bu argue with the old ancestor of the Ouyang family? He spoke to the old ancestor of the Ouyang family with great dominance. After speaking, he looked at the old ancestor of the Ouyang family with disdain in his eyes. As for Luo Yang beside him, he looked at him with admiration. At this moment, Luo Yang thought to himself that he must become like his boss in the future, full of dominance, threatening to attack people's capitals at the slightest provocation. And it seemed that if it weren't for his boss's superiors not allowing him to act so freely, he probably would have already reached the empire's capital by now. And after hearing Lu Bu's words, the old ancestor of the Ouyang family's face showed a terrifying gloom. At this moment, he wished he could tear Lu Bu to shreds. Chapter 385, The Mighty Lu Bu and the Underworld's Predicament. He had not expected anyone would dare to treat the empire of his Ouyang family with such contempt. One must know that even the neighboring Xiaoyao Empire would not dare to look down upon the empire of their Ouyang family, let alone this unknown general standing before him. Thinking of this, his expression turned gloomy and furious as he looked at Lu Bu. Your Excellency, are you trying to become a sworn enemy of my Ouyang family? Following this, the old ancestor of the Ouyang family looked at Lu Bu with killing intent in his eyes and spoke. After he finished speaking, the murderous aura on his body could no longer be concealed and was immediately released. At this moment, he looked like a god of slaughter who had emerged from hell. However, how could this trace of killing intent be enough in front of Lu Bu? Lu Bu looked at the old ancestor of the Ouyang family before him with a hint of disdain on his face. One must know that Lu Bu was the god of war of Bing province, and simultaneously the #1 person in terms of strength among the 3 kingdoms. Therefore, how could a small amount of killing intent make him afraid? Lu Bu lightly took a step forward, and an even more terrifying killing intent emanated from him. At this moment, Lu Bu looked like a demon walking out of hell. Meanwhile, the old ancestor of the Ouyang family looked like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered in front of him. But the old ancestor of the Ouyang family had not yet realized the severity of the situation, as he continued to stare at Lu Bu with eyes full of rage. And how could Lu Bu be the kind of person who reasoned? He quickly swung the heavenly halberd in his hand. Instantly, Lu Bu looked like a devil god descending to the mortal world. Terrifying power fell from the sky. It directly smashed onto the body of the old ancestor of the Ouyang family. The next second, the body of the old ancestor of the Ouyang family was directly sent flying. At the same time, Lu Bu transformed into a streak of purple light and pursued him. Clearly, Lu Bu did not want to have a major battle with the old ancestor of the Ouyang family here. After all, if he resolved the old ancestor of the Ouyang family here, the capital of the entire 100 Battles dynasty would likely be destroyed. As it was his vassal state, Lu Bu naturally did not want such a situation to occur in his vassal state. At this moment, current Grand Pioneer under Lu Bu was also extremely excited, as he had not expected his general to be so mighty. Thus, he held his weapon and charged toward the Saint entry-level general in front of him. At this moment, he seemed energized, and the power within his body was circulating rapidly. He looked like a heavenly god standing in the sky. However, this heavenly god was currently transforming towards the direction of a devil god. As for the other armies of the Great Xia dynasty, they also immediately opened the city gates and charged towards the Silver Armor army outside. Terrifying killing intent instantly swept across the entire world. Subsequently, a major battle unfolded here. However, the armies of the Great Xia dynasty were cultivators above the Grotto Heaven realm, so their strength was not weak when facing these troops. In fact, they demonstrated an overwhelming advantage in the battle. As for Lu Bu in the sky, he was even more decisively crushing the old ancestor of the Ouyang family before him. After all, the old ancestor of the Ouyang family was merely at the mid-stage of Saint King, while Lu Bu's cultivation had already reached the late Saint King. Furthermore, Lu Bu's combat power far exceeded the late Saint King. Therefore, this major battle was a crushing victory from the very beginning. Just as a fierce major battle was occurring in the northern region, An unexpected event also happened on the Hell side in the central region. Although Hell had finally established a firm foothold in the central region over the past 2 years, the relationship between Hell and the Blood Rain Tower had indeed worsened. It could be said that the two factions in the central region were now mortal enemies. And this time, the Blood Rain Tower even sent out several great saint-level experts and one half-step quasi-emperor. Of course, this top expert of the Blood Rain Tower was only one step away from entering the quasi-emperor level. Naturally, this step was like a chasm in the heavens, preventing him from crossing it. I didn't expect the Blood Rain Tower to send out such powerful existences, but we can indeed choose not to fight now. That way, the Blood Rain Tower won't be able to find our location regardless. Wang Chongyang frowned as he looked at the news transmitted from Hell in his hand. Although he had also achieved a breakthrough to the Saint King realm at this time, the experts appearing from the Blood Rain Tower this time were too strong. They currently only had 4 great saint-level experts in Hell. It was still somewhat difficult to contend against the Blood Rain Tower. At this moment, Wang Chongyang wore a look of helplessness on his face. After all, it was still somewhat difficult for their Hell to contend against the Blood Rain Tower. However, if they did not act, it would be very difficult for their Hell to continue operating in the central region. After all, if Hell chose to remain silent now, it would mean that Hell's foundation was not as strong as the Blood Rain Towers. Who would dare to seek out their Hell for help then? More importantly, the top experts in the central region were all paying attention to this battle. If Hell did not act, then these top experts and forces would likely learn the true foundation of Hell. This was why Wang Chongyang was so helpless. Although Hell currently possessed 4 great saint-level experts. However, among these 4 great saint-level experts, aside from Jiang Taishu, who was already a great Sage Perfection Realm expert, Sword Immortal, and the other 2 had just achieved a breakthrough to the Great Saint Realm. The cultivation of the 3 of them was currently early stage Great Sage, so it would be difficult to face the masters of the Blood Rain Tower this time. Reporting to the supervisor, someone is requesting an audience outside, claiming to be sent by the monarch. Just as Wang Chongyang was having a headache, black and white mysterious sword appeared directly before him, cupped his hands, and spoke to Wang Chongyang. Wang Chongyang, who was initially suffering from a headache, suddenly had his eyes light up after hearing black and white mysterious sword's words. Since they were sent by their monarch, the people this time should not be too weak. After all, last time, their monarch sent over Sword Immortal Yi Guqing and Jiang Taishu. Following this, he quickly got up to meet the people sent by their monarch this time. When Wang Chongyang appeared outside Hell, he saw 11 mysterious figures wearing blood-red robes standing there, and the aura emanating from these mysterious figures far surpassed that of him, the supervisor. Furthermore, Wang Chongyang sensed that the murderous aura on these mysterious figures far exceeded that of ordinary assassins. Blood droplets greets the supervisor. These 11 mysterious figures wearing blood-red robes were the blood droplets. The leader of the blood droplets slowly stepped forward and spoke to Wang Chongyang. Although Wang Chongyang's cultivation was indeed not as high as theirs, having arrived here, they were obliged to obey Wang Chongyang's orders. This was why the blood droplets were so respectful toward Wang Chongyang. Chapter 386 Information about Wang Chongyang, Chu Chen's growth. Wang Chongyang also valued the blood droplets and the others greatly. After all, even with his Saint King level cultivation, he felt incredibly insignificant in front of the blood droplets. From this, he could tell that the blood droplets and the others' cultivation had already surpassed his. May I ask what level your cultivation has reached? Wang Chongyang then directly questioned the blood droplets in front of him. After all, they no longer had much time to wait. If the blood droplets and the others' strength was sufficient, then their underworld could confront the Blood Rain Tower. My cultivation is late stage Great Sage, and the cultivation of these 10 people has all reached the Great Saint Realm. The leader of the blood droplets, upon hearing Wang Chongyang's words, did not hide anything and directly informed Wang Chongyang. Since they had come here to obey Wang Chongyang's orders, they naturally would not conceal their cultivation. When Wang Chongyang heard the leader of the blood droplets' words, the worry on his face instantly vanished, and he looked at the blood droplets with a beaming smile. You've arrived just in time. Our underworld is currently facing a formidable force. This time, they've sent out as many as 7 or 8 great saint-level cultivators, so your arrival now is perfect to hold them back. Wang Chongyang then began to tell the blood droplets about the Blood Rain Tower, and also revealed the number of great saints and Saint King level experts the Blood Rain Tower had dispatched this time. The underworld did not fear the Saint King level numbers. After all, there were quite a few Saint King level experts in the underworld now. What they truly feared were the great saint level experts of the Blood Rain Tower, and the arrival of the blood droplets this time could perfectly resolve this issue. Upon hearing Wang Chongyang's words, the blood droplets understood the strength of the Blood Rain Tower. But at this moment, there was no trace of worry on his face. Instead, there was a hint of disdain. After all, among their blood droplets, there were 11 great saint-level experts, so why should they fear the so-called Blood Rain Tower? After Wang Chongyang got the result he wanted, he immediately had the underworld assassins spread the news that they had accepted the Blood Rain Tower's challenge. In just a few days, news about the Blood Rain Tower and the underworld spread throughout the entire Central Domain. At the same time, the Central Domain began to anticipate the event, as this was the second confrontation between the two major assassin organizations. Although the underworld had achieved ultimate victory in the first confrontation, neither side had dispatched exceptionally powerful individuals in that clash. This time's confrontation, however, involved individuals at the half-step quasi-emperor realm, so this battle was the one they truly wanted to witness. Actually, the relationship between the underworld and the Blood Rain Tower didn't have to be this bad. But over the past 2 years, the underworld had taken on the majority of the Blood Rain Tower's assassination missions, which was why the Blood Rain Tower couldn't help but seek trouble with the underworld. In the main hall of Tianxian Holy Land, after more than 2 years of cultivation, Chu Chen's cultivation had now broken through to the true king realm. At this moment, he was in front of the Holy Lord, and of course, the Holy Lord of Tianxian Holy Land had also received news from the outside world. So he slowly handed the message in his hand to Chu Chun. Chu Chun, with a hint of doubt on his face, directly read the letter handed to him by the Holy Lord. After finishing it, a look of confusion also appeared on his face. Does the underworld really have the confidence to deal with the Blood Rain Tower? After all, the Blood Rain Tower's strength is undeniable, and the underworld has only appeared for a few years. What strength could they possibly have to withstand the Blood Rain Tower's attacks? Chu Chun did not yet know that the underworld was his younger brother's force, which was why he thought the underworld was weak. Of course, more importantly, the underworld had appeared for too short a time, while the Blood Rain Tower had existed in the Central Domain for hundreds of thousands of years. Chu Chun would not believe it if someone said it had no foundation. Although the underworld has been established for a short time, it is a force that I cannot see through. In that past great battle alone, great saint-level cultivators from the underworld appeared, and during this period, the underworld also assassinated a great saint-level cultivator. So, the underworld should not be as simple as we imagine. The Holy Lord of Tianxian Holy Land shook his head upon hearing Chu Chen's words. He did not believe that the underworld would be destroyed by the Blood Rain Tower. At the same time, the Holy Lord of Tianxian Holy Land also believed that if the underworld dared to accept the Blood Rain Tower's challenge, it meant that the underworld had the strength to deal with the Blood Rain Tower. Otherwise, the underworld would not have made such a decision. Holy Lord, I wonder if I can go and see how powerful this so-called underworld is at that time. Upon hearing the words of the Holy Lord of Tianxian Holy Land, Chu Chun instantly became curious. So he spoke to the Holy Lord of Tianxian Holy Land beside him. As the saint of Tianxian Holy Land, Chu Chen's authority was great, but it would be difficult for him to go and watch this great battle this time. After all, his cultivation was only at the true king realm, and he would need protection from a great saint-level expert at that time. Your master has already broken through to the great saint realm, and I presume he will not miss this great battle either. You can go with him then. The Holy Lord of Tianxian Holy Land did not refuse Chu Chun after hearing his words. Instead, he waved his hand at Chu Chun and said, a smile appearing on his face after he finished speaking. Chu Chun was somewhat surprised upon hearing the words of the Holy Lord of Tianxian Holy Land, but after the surprise came joy. After all, if his master broke through to the great saint realm, then his master's title of Sword Saint should be changed to Sword Heavenly Immortal. After Chu Chun learned that his master had broken through to the great saint realm, he hurriedly bid farewell to the Holy Lord of Tianxian Holy Land and headed in the direction where his master was located. The Holy Lord of Tianxian Holy Land watched the impetuous Chu Chun, his lips curving slightly upwards, and then he disappeared into the main hall. At this moment, Chu Chun had already appeared on Wenjian Peak, which was where his master resided. And Chu Chun, who had just appeared here, unexpectedly found that his junior sister was also here. It was Xiao Zi, who had an agreement with Chu Fan. At this moment, Xiao Zi had changed her usual demeanor, wearing a silver-white long robe, looking as if she were a heavenly immortal descended from the 9 heavens. Zi greets senior brother. Upon seeing Chu Chun arrive, Xiao Zi respectfully bowed to him. Junior sister, no need for formalities. Has master come out of seclusion? Ever since Chu Chun learned about his junior sister's feelings for his younger brother, he had been very fond of this junior sister of his. Now, he quickly waved his hand at Xiao Zi. However, he looked towards the place where his master was in seclusion, his eyes filled with anticipation. His master had been in seclusion for several years, so he had been looking forward to his master emerging. This was also why he rushed here so quickly after hearing the Holy Lord's words. Chapter 387, Chu Chen's Master, Long Qing Feng, and the Unfathomable Underworld. Just as Chu Fan finished speaking, a powerful, resonant voice slowly emerged from the main hall. Chun'er is truly worthy of being a prodigy possessing the Supreme Bone. He actually achieved a breakthrough directly into the true king realm during the few years I was in seclusion. I imagine there aren't many prodigies left in the central region who can compare to you, are there? Following this voice, a middle-aged man wearing a light robe slowly walked out of the main hall. A dark green, long sword hung from the middle-aged man's waist. And more importantly, the faint sword intent emanating from him was even more terrifying. It was as if the entire world had to submit to this single stream of sword intent. Greetings, Master. Congratulations on achieving a breakthrough to the Great Saint Realm. Chu Chen looked at the middle-aged man before him, a look of excitement on his face. He was naturally happy that his master had achieved a breakthrough to the Great Saint Realm. Has anything interesting happened in the central region during the time I was in seclusion? Chu Chen's master, Long Qing Feng, waved his hand and asked. After speaking, he did not forget to beckon to Xiao Zi, who was standing beside him. Nothing major has happened in the central region these past few years, except that senior brother became the saint of Tianxian Holy Land. Xiao Zi obediently came to Long Qingfeng's side, and then she looked at her master with a proud expression and spoke. I'm not surprised that Chun'er was able to become the saint. After all, Chun'er's talent is obvious. Long Qingfeng was not shocked when he heard this news. Instead, he nodded approvingly at Chu Chen. After all, Chu Chen's current cultivation level was already among the peak existences among the prodigies, so it was no surprise that he could become the saint of their Tianxian Holy Land. Master, a few years ago, an organization called the Underworld finally emerged. This organization mainly accepts assassination missions and is similar to the Blood Rain Tower in the central region. When the Underworld first appeared, Chu Chen had long wanted to see the great battle between the Underworld and the Blood Rain Tower, so he immediately brought up the topic of the Underworld. At the same time, he also explained the situation of the Underworld over the past few years. Finally, he mentioned the upcoming battle between the Underworld and the Blood Rain Tower. After all, the entire central region knew about the upcoming great battle between the Underworld and the Blood Rain Tower. It seems this organization is not weak. It's a good time to go and see this so-called great battle between the Underworld and the Blood Rain Tower. If you too want to go, come with your master. After hearing Chu Chen's words, Long Qingfeng was also slightly surprised. He hadn't expected such a powerful force to emerge in such a short time. Furthermore, its strength was not weak, so the Underworld successfully attracted Long Qingfeng's attention. Chu Chen was delighted when he heard Long Qingfeng's words. He had originally intended to go and watch the great battle between the Underworld and the Blood Rain Tower this time. He never expected that his master would plan to take him before he even had a chance to ask. However, Tianxian Holy Land was not the only one to receive this news at this time. Even other top-tier powers had received this news. At this moment, at the Heavenly Dao Alliance, the leader of the Heavenly Dao Alliance was also somewhat surprised after receiving the news about the Underworld and the Blood Rain Tower. It seems the Underworld is not as simple as we imagined. I thought they would choose not to fight this time, but I didn't expect the Underworld would choose to accept the challenge, even under these circumstances. Could the Underworld's strength truly exceed my imagination? The leader of the Heavenly Dao Alliance slowly raised his head and looked at the sky, his brows furrowed as he pondered the strength of the Underworld in confusion. The strength the Underworld displayed recently was not particularly formidable. Apart from assassinating that great saint-level expert, the only time the Underworld truly displayed its strength was during its previous confrontation with the Blood Rain Tower. However, based on these two clashes, it could only be deduced that there were great saint-level existences within the Underworld, yet the Blood Rain Tower was mobilizing no less than 7 or 8 great saint-level existences this time. Therefore, when the news was first received, the Underworld did not issue any statement. This led all the powers in the central region to believe that the Underworld would choose to retreat this time, but they never expected that after half a month of silence, the Underworld would make such a response. This left many top-tier powers completely bewildered. Even the leader of the Heavenly Dao Alliance was the same. However, the leader of the Heavenly Dao Alliance was not the only one feeling confused at this moment. Other top-tier powers were as well. Although these top-tier powers were confused, the upcoming clash between the Underworld and the Blood Rain Tower made them even more curious and excited. After all, both the Underworld and the Blood Rain Tower were assassin organizations, and these top-tier powers were not particularly friendly toward assassin organizations to begin with. Since the two major assassin organizations were fighting each other, they were naturally happy. Of course, the most surprised party at this moment was probably the Blood Rain Tower, as they had never expected the underworld to accept the challenge in the first place. Could it be that the underworld's strength is not as simple as we imagined, or did we underestimate the underworld's power? A great saint-level expert from the Blood Rain Tower was also surprised after hearing the underworld's acceptance of the challenge. He then looked at the master of the Blood Rain Tower in front of him and asked, "The underworld shouldn't be that powerful. If their strength were truly that great, why would they constantly tolerate us, the Blood Rain Tower? Could they have brought in outside help this time?" The master of the Blood Rain Tower frowned after hearing the words of this top assassin. However, he clearly did not believe that the underworld possessed such formidable strength, so he shook his head with a frown. If the underworld truly brought in outside help, then the only power capable of supporting them right now would likely be the Heavenly Dao Alliance. However, the Heavenly Dao Alliance has made no moves during this period, so the underworld should not have much to do with the Heavenly Dao Alliance this time, right? Another great saint-level expert slowly stood up and spoke, frowning as he reached this point. If there was any power that could make their Blood Rain Tower feel apprehension, it would only be the Heavenly Dao Alliance, as the Heavenly Dao Alliance's strength already exceeded their tolerance level. Unless they wanted to perish together with the Heavenly Dao Alliance, the Blood Rain Tower could not possibly fight the Heavenly Dao Alliance. Regardless of whether the underworld's true strength is formidable or if they have outside help, since they dare to accept the challenge, then in this great battle, we shall let the world witness the true power of our Blood Rain Tower. The old man who had been sitting silently slowly stood up and spoke. After he finished speaking, the terrifying chi emanating from his body subtly spread out. However, even this mere wisp of chi caused everyone present to feel oppressed. Chapter 388. On the eve of the great battle, various forces arrived, and the relationship between the Heavenly Dao Alliance and these forces. This person was the strongest combat force Blood Rain Tower deployed this time, and his cultivation was also very close to the Quasi-Emperor realm. This was why he had such confidence among the Blood Rain Tower's assassins. After all, since he was so close to the Quasi-Emperor realm, those cultivators in the Great Saint realm posed no great threat to him. The other Blood Rain Tower assassins also nodded after hearing his words, as Blood Rain Tower had not only dispatched Great Saint-level assassins this time. There was also this top expert who was close to the Quasi-Emperor realm. As the confrontation between Blood Rain Tower and the underworld slowly approached, many major powers in the central domain came to observe this great battle. Among them, Long Qingfeng of Tianxian Holy Land led Chu Chun and Xiao Zi to the venue chosen for the great battle between the two top expert forces. At this time, it wasn't just them who appeared. There were also top expert forces from the central domain, and most of the experts from these top expert forces who appeared this time had already reached the Great Saint realm. The arrival of Long Qingfeng and the two others naturally attracted the attention of everyone present, as Tianxian Holy Land was considered a top expert existence in the entire central domain. I didn't expect Peak Master Long to have broken through to the Great Saint realm. It seems I'll have to call Peak Master Long Clear Wind Sword Immortal from now on. Just as Long Qingfeng and the two others had arrived, a leisurely voice was heard from afar. Then, a middle-aged man dressed in a white robe slowly spoke to Long Qingfeng, though a hint of surprise could be seen on the middle-aged man's face. Although he had entered the world earlier than Long Qingfeng, this middle-aged man's cultivation was currently only at the Great Saint realm. Therefore, he was somewhat surprised when Long Qingfeng's cultivation broke through to the Great Saint realm. And at this moment, it wasn't just this middle-aged man who was surprised. Others also had surprised expressions on their faces. Although Long Qingfeng could be considered a contemporary of theirs, his age was far younger than theirs, which was why they were surprised to learn that Long Qingfeng had broken through to the Great Saint realm. While everyone was still sighing, several streaks of light flashed across the sky, and then the Heavenly Dao Alliance leader appeared with several Great Saint realm experts from the Heavenly Dao Alliance. Seeing the Heavenly Dao Alliance leader appear, all the Great Saint-level experts present looked at the Heavenly Dao Alliance leader with solemn gazes. After all, the Heavenly Dao Alliance leader was the strongest among the Great Saint-level experts present. Moreover, they couldn't see through the Heavenly Dao Alliance leader's cultivation. Of course, more importantly, was the relationship between the Heavenly Dao Alliance and their forces. The Heavenly Dao Alliance leader naturally noticed the gazes of these Great Saint-level experts, but at this moment, he did not pay attention to these Great Saint-level cultivators from various forces. Instead, he stood calmly in place, awaiting the arrival of this great battle. With the arrival of the Heavenly Dao Alliance, the atmosphere on the scene began to become somewhat unnatural. The initially lively venue had now become silent. Even Chu Chun, who was beside Long Qingfeng, was at this moment scrutinizing the Heavenly Dao Alliance leader. Just as the atmosphere on the scene became very oppressive, one after another, auras came from the sky. The owners of these auras had clearly all reached above the Saint King realm. Moreover, among them, there were many auras belonging to the Great Saint realm. Soon, everyone saw the Blood Rain Tower's experts appear before them. The cultivation of the Blood Rain Tower experts who appeared this time had at least reached the Saint King realm. There were dozens of assassins in the Saint King realm alone. What's more, there were also 9 Great Saint realm experts, and that top expert from Blood Rain Tower who was close to the Quasi-Emperor realm. Their appearance instantly attracted the attention of everyone present. After all, these are the top expert of Blood Rain Tower. One must know that the forces that appeared here numbered in the dozens. Yet the Great Saint-level experts they brought out were only dozens. From this, one could see how strong the Blood Rain Tower's experts were. Of course, this was also because only one Great Saint-level cultivator from these forces came to watch this great battle. Otherwise, they could also bring out many Great Saint-level experts. Blood Rain Tower truly lives up to its reputation as the Central Domain's top expert assassin organization. This person's cultivation is probably just one step away from entering the Quasi-Emperor realm, isn't it? At this moment, the Heavenly Dao Alliance leader leisurely cast his gaze towards this top expert assassin from Blood Rain Tower, who was close to the Quasi-Emperor realm. As the Heavenly Dao Alliance leader, he could naturally perceive how powerful this top expert assassin from Blood Rain Tower truly was. Although that's true, Blood Rain Tower probably hasn't revealed its trump card this time, as it's impossible for Blood Rain Tower not to have Quasi-Emperor realm experts within it. An elder beside the Alliance leader also glanced at this top expert assassin from Blood Rain Tower and slowly spoke. Although this top expert assassin from Blood Rain Tower's strength was close to the Quasi-Emperor realm, he was not considered a truly strong expert to their Heavenly Dao Alliance, because even Quasi-Emperor realm experts could appear within their Heavenly Dao Alliance, let alone a cultivator who was close to the Quasi-Emperor realm. I wonder if any Quasi-Emperor realm experts will appear from the underworld this time. At this moment, the Heavenly Dao Alliance leader looked forward to the underworld's appearance with a leisurely gaze. Now, throughout the Central Domain, the only one he couldn't see through was the underworld. As for the other top expert forces, it was because he wasn't confident he could annihilate them. Otherwise, the Heavenly Dao Alliance leader would have long since made a move against these top expert forces. The elder beside him also began to look forward to the underworld after hearing his words. Is the underworld afraid to appear? Could it be that too many experts from my Blood Rain Tower have appeared, causing the underworld to now be afraid to make a move? After half an hour passed, and the underworld still hadn't appeared, a Great Saint-level assassin from Blood Rain Tower couldn't help but taunt the people present. His words completely reached the ears of everyone present, instantly surprising them. They also didn't expect Blood Rain Tower's assassin to belittle the underworld in such a way. One must know that Blood Rain Tower's assassins usually don't speak. However, at this moment, these top expert forces also began to get curious, as they hadn't expected the underworld still hadn't appeared. One must know that Blood Rain Tower, as one of the 2 main protagonists of this great battle, had already appeared for half an hour, yet the underworld still hadn't appeared, which was somewhat unreasonable. Therefore, many people's thoughts were now similar to those of Blood Rain Tower's assassin. They all felt that the underworld was probably afraid to appear this time after seeing the powerful strength of Blood Rain Tower's assassins. Chapter 389, The Arrival of the Underworld and Its Shocking Strength. While some people thought that way, others did not. For example, the Tiandao Alliance leader at this moment believed that the underworld would definitely come, because he felt that the underworld could not possibly allow the Blood Rain Tower to be so arrogant. After all, how could the underworld, which even he could not see through, be so timid as to not dare to accept the challenge? And the facts were exactly as the Tiandao Alliance leader had imagined. Just as the Blood Rain Tower's assassins were about to say something more, a domineering voice resounded from the sky. Besides its domineering quality, this voice also carried a powerful deterrent. Does destroying a mere ant require us to arrive early? As this voice fell, one muffled sound after another echoed from the horizon. Then, dozens of rays of light landed opposite the Blood Rain Tower's assassins. Standing at the very front was a middle-aged man dressed in white, with a handsome face and a gentle aura constantly emanating from him. However, the aura on this middle-aged man was unforgettable. This middle-aged man was none other than Jiang Taishu, the strongest in the underworld currently. During this period, he had been cultivating continuously, which led to his cultivation almost breaking through to the Quasi-Emperor realm. It could be said that the current Jiang Taishu didn't even know if he was in the Great Saint realm or the Quasi-Emperor realm. Although his cultivation had not yet entered the Quasi-Emperor realm at this time, his strength was already no weaker than that of an ordinary Quasi-Emperor realm expert. Beside him were the 3 great sword masters, Sword Immortal Yi Guqing, Sword Godly Chungang, and Sword Demon Duga Qiubai. Although all three of them had just broken through to the Great Saint realm, it was still very easy for them to defeat mid-stage Great Sage experts with their early-stage Great Sage cultivation. Behind them were the blood droplets who had appeared in their underworld this time. It could be said that the underworld had directly dispatched all of its Great Saint-level experts this time, including Jiang Taishu, the expert who was about to break through to the Quasi-Emperor realm. The underworld dispatched a total of 15 Great Saint realm experts this time. Besides these top Great Saint realm experts, the underworld also dispatched dozens of Saint King realm experts. Instantly, the underworld's experts overwhelmed the Blood Rain Tower in terms of numbers. This is truly interesting. I didn't expect the underworld to dispatch over a dozen Great Saint realm cultivators this time, and this person's cultivation is probably about to enter the Quasi-Emperor realm, even stronger than the Blood Rain Tower's top assassin. It seems the Blood Rain Tower will suffer a loss here today. After seeing the underworld's experts appear, the Tiandao Alliance leader instantly saw through the cultivation of these experts from the underworld. So, he looked at the Blood Rain Tower's direction with a hint of curiosity in his eyes. Although he initially believed that the Blood Rain Tower might not be a match for the underworld, he did not expect the underworld to have so many great saints and saint kings appear this time. The elder beside him also nodded upon hearing his words. At the same time, this elder also looked at the underworld's experts with great curiosity. As a top expert of the Heavenly Dao Alliance, he could naturally say that he understood the entire central region very well, but he did not expect the underworld's appearance this time to shatter his understanding of the central region. And at this moment, the other great saint-level experts present naturally also noticed this scene. So, they all looked at the appearing underworld with incredulous eyes. The number of great saint-level cultivators appearing from the underworld this time truly exceeds our imagination. Over a dozen great saint-level cultivators have appeared directly. The middle-aged man standing beside Long Qingfeng also said with some shock at this moment. After speaking, he slowly shifted his gaze to the assassins of the Blood Rain Tower. At this moment, the Blood Rain Tower's top assassin looked at the underworld with disbelief in his eyes. The underworld is far from as simple as we imagined. Just the great saint-level experts who have appeared this time can rival an ordinary top power. Long Qingfeng also shook his head and said to the middle-aged man beside him at this moment. Although the strength the underworld currently displayed was still a notch below their Tianxian Holy Land. But who knew if there were even more powerful existences hidden in the underworld? After all, he didn't believe that the underworld had brought out all of its power this time. Unless it was a matter of life and death for a power, how could that power bring out all of its strength? And at this moment, Long Qingfeng was not the only one with this thought. Others also had this thought in their hearts. However, what they didn't know was that the underworld had indeed dispatched all of its great saint-level experts this time, with the main purpose of deterring the central region. The most important reason was that the top powers of the central region could not find the location of their underworld, which is why they dared to dispatch all of their great saint-level experts. Moreover, besides these great saint-level experts, the underworld also had many Saint King-level experts guarding the underworld. So, as long as a top expert did not appear at the underworld's location, nothing would happen. Is this the strength of the underworld? It seems my Blood Rain Tower underestimated you, but who wins and who loses is still uncertain. The Blood Rain Tower's top assassin, who was close to the Quasi-Emperor realm, also slowly stepped forward at this moment and looked at the underworld, speaking. However, one could see a hint of solemnity in his eyes at this moment. Clearly, he also felt that the underworld was a bit troublesome at this moment. If you're so confident, then let's fight. Jiang Taishu had no intention of continuing to drag this out with this guy. After all, his cultivation was already about to break through to the Quasi-Emperor realm, and he now wished he could cultivate in the Time Pagoda every day. Therefore, Jiang Taishu now desperately wanted to quickly resolve the battle here and return to the Time Pagoda to cultivate and break through his cultivation. That's why he spoke to the Blood Rain Tower's top assassin with such domineering confidence. And the Blood Rain Tower's top assassin frowned upon hearing Jiang Taishu's words. He hadn't expected the underworld's assassin in front of him to be so domineering. Then, he instantly tore a rift in the space in front of him, and in the next second, his entire being appeared directly in the sky hundreds of thousands of meters away. Seeing this, Jiang Taishu also transformed into a silver-white ray of light and disappeared from his original spot. When he reappeared, he was already in front of the Blood Rain Tower's top assassin. After Jiang Taishu's arrival, the Blood Rain Tower's top assassin also directly attacked Jiang Taishu, a blood-red palm print directly striking towards Jiang Taishu. And Jiang Taishu, seeing this scene, unhurriedly threw a punch forward. This punch was like a blazing sun, illuminating the entire sky. At the same time, terrifying, scorching light also spread outwards, instantly shattering the blood-red palm in front of him. Chapter 390, The Power of the Underworld, is unbelievable. Moreover, his punch, which resembled a scorching sun, continued to strike towards this top assassin of the Blood Rain Tower. This top assassin of the Blood Rain Tower clearly hadn't anticipated this scene, so a blood-red light instantly appeared beneath his feet, and his entire being vanished into this expanse of sky. But how could this small trick of his possibly escape Jiang Taishu's notice? A silver-white light instantly appeared beneath Jiang Taishu's feet, and when he reappeared, he was already behind this top assassin of the Blood Rain Tower. Jiang Taishu instantly launched a Void Realm Great Hand Seal. The terrifying power tore at the surrounding space, causing loud, ripping sounds. And Jiang Taishu's entire palm struck directly onto the body of this top assassin of the Blood Rain Tower. However, at this moment, a blood-red light emanated from the body of this top assassin of the Blood Rain Tower, enveloping him. This blood-red light successfully blocked Jiang Taishu's attack. Even so, his entire body was sent flying tens of thousands of feet away by Jiang Taishu's attack. Subsequently, a look of fury appeared on the face of this top assassin of the Blood Rain Tower, and then he was seen rushing towards Jiang Taishu, radiating blood-red light all around him. A silver light and a blood-red light continuously collided in the sky. As these two lights continuously clashed in the sky, Jiang Taishu and this top assassin of the Blood Rain Tower officially began their final battle. Just as the two initiated their final battle, below them, Sword Immortal Yi Guqing slowly took a step forward. Following this, his sword intent surged and ruthlessly crushed a mid-stage Saint King assassin from the Blood Rain Tower. Meanwhile, this mid-stage Saint King assassin from the Blood Rain Tower looked at Sword Immortal with shock in his eyes. Because he naturally sensed Sword Immortal's true cultivation, but he never expected that Sword Immortal, who was merely an early-stage Saint King, could bring such a powerful sense of suppression upon him. However, at this moment, Sword Immortal transformed into a streak of sword light and vanished into the horizon. When he reappeared, he was already 10,000 meters high in the sky. This Blood Rain Tower gold medal assassin, although intimidated by the terrifying sword intent Sword Immortal had just released, naturally could not show cowardice at this moment. He too transformed into a streak of blood-red light and disappeared from his original spot. When he reappeared, he was already in front of Sword Immortal. Simultaneously, this Blood Rain Tower gold medal assassin instantly concealed himself within the space. As assassins, what they excelled at most was concealment and slaughter. Therefore, this Blood Rain Tower gold medal assassin had now completely hidden himself around Sword Immortal. He wanted to find a flaw in Sword Immortal and then deliver a fatal blow to him. But how could Sword Immortal, who was of the immortal rank, possibly reveal a flaw? Sword Immortal was seen standing slowly in the sky with his arms crossed, and his eyes were slightly narrowed. However, his gaze was fixed intently on a certain spot in the space before him. The Blood Rain Tower assassin hidden in the space was greatly alarmed upon seeing Sword Immortal's gaze, but he was extremely confident in his own concealment skills at this moment. Thus, this Blood Rain Tower assassin remained hidden there without making a move, instead secretly observing Sword Immortal. But how could he know the monstrous nature of Sword Immortal? Sword Immortal was seen forming his fingers into a sword mudra, and then he directly pointed a sword finger towards the location of this Blood Rain Tower gold medal assassin. The next second, a terrifying sword chi shot directly towards this Blood Rain Tower gold medal assassin. The gold medal assassin, who had originally been full of confidence, instantly panicked, and his entire being vanished from this expanse of sky. He then quickly concealed himself once more. As for Sword Immortal, he was now carefully surveying his surroundings. Although it wouldn't take him long to find this Blood Rain Tower gold medal assassin, it was indeed somewhat troublesome for him right now. After all, this Blood Rain Tower gold medal assassin remained continuously hidden. Just as this Blood Rain Tower gold medal assassin was hiding like a mouse, below them, Dugu Qiubai and the others also engaged the top assassins of the Blood Rain Tower. Among them, the top assassin of the Blood Rain Tower facing Dugu Qiubai was a Saint King level gold medal assassin. Dugu Qiubai's swordsmanship was among the most supreme of all sword experts. Not to mention that his self-created 9 Swords of Dugu was a swordsmanship from the most supreme wuxia novels. Of course, in this world, his 9 Swords of Dugu had also been strengthened by the system, making it a supreme existence compared to ordinary sword techniques. The long sword in his hand appeared to strike this Blood Rain Tower gold medal assassin in front of him quite ordinarily. Yet these simple moves made this Blood Rain Tower gold medal assassin feel extremely difficult to resist. It was as if a terrifying sword intent was continuously eroding the surrounding space. As for Li Chungang on the other side, his sword moves were extremely magnificent. He was seen first unleashing the move One Sword Immortal Kneels. One Sword Immortal Kneels emphasizes overwhelming opponents with chi, so a powerful aura emanated from Li Chuangong's body. Instantly, this blood-rain tower gold medal assassin felt a terrifying aura engulf him. However, this blood-rain tower gold medal assassin was currently struggling to resist this aura. Since one Sword Immortal Niels failed to slay this blood-rain tower assassin, Li Chuangang once again displayed his other ultimate techniques. Sword Chi locks Dragon City. Terrifying Sword Chi instantly filled the entire sky. Li Chuangang stood in the sky like an emperor among swords. The surrounding Sword Chi rendered this blood-rain tower gold medal assassin immobile. He looked at Li Chuangang, standing in the sky with terror in his eyes. Meanwhile, the crowd below watching the great battle in the sky were filled mostly with disbelief. Even the Tiandao Alliance leader was looking up at the sky with an expression of disbelief. What exactly is the origin of this underworld? The strength of every cultivator among them, when compared to others in the same realm, far surpasses them. The elder beside the Tiandao Alliance leader spoke to him with a hint of shock. At this moment, he held the fighting strength of Li Chuangang, Sword Immortal, and the others in extremely high regard. Although the strength of Sword Immortal and the others was only early stage Saint King. However, when facing mid-stage Saint King gold medal assassin from the Bloodrain Tower, they were in a state of crushing dominance. This kind of situation usually only occurs when a strong expert of a higher realm crushes an expert of a lower realm. Yet now, a crushing dominance of a lower realm over a higher realm had appeared. Such a situation was extremely rare, even within their Heavenly Dao Alliance. This was why the Elder was so attentive to and shocked by Sword Immortal and the others from the underworld.